Hello, everyone. Omni Sensei here with What if Elijah Mikaelson had a hybrid son? Teen Wolf X The Originals. Part 3. If you enjoy this kind of content, please hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. Now, let's jump right into it. Elias messed around with the rearview mirror. Seeing himself, he was forced to take a double take. He had stopped by a barbershop. His hair was short, a simple fade. He didn't remember the last time he had gotten a haircut. His mother had likely been the last person to cut his hair. He didn't often think about her. Her death had happened so many years ago. Her picture still rested in his wallet. She went everywhere he went. Ignoring the entering Mystic Falls sign, he continued forward, driving past the high school. Past the downtown part of the city where Bonnie had always hung out at. He remembered she would take him to the Mystic Grill after school for a milkshake. Caroline and Elena would join them. Thinking about it now, he was usually surrounded by gossip. It wasn't too long before he was at his Graham's house. Walking up the brick steps, he waited at the front door. A whisper never came. Reaching for the door handle, he walked inside. The place was exactly as he remembered it. The stairs to the right. The living room directly in front of him, and the kitchen just behind it. Only the place lacked the warmth it had once held. Something was off. Graham's? Walking towards her spell room, he frowned, finding it empty. Where was she? Walking towards the kitchen, he reached into one of the drawers, pulling out a notebook. Inside was a list of numbers his grandma kept in case she needed to get in touch with someone. She wasn't exactly the kind of person to use a cell phone. Flipping through the small notebook, he smiled as he saw Bonnie's number. Pulling out his phone, he called her. He waited and waited before finally being sent to voicemail. He tried a couple of more times, only for the same thing to happen. He could feel it. Something was wrong. Walking outside, he closed the door behind him, making sure to lock it, unlike the last person that had left. Getting into his car, he tapped the wheel a few times before making a decision. Starting up his car, he headed back into town. Pulling over across the street from the Mystic Grill, he raised an eyebrow as he saw her blonde hair and blue eyes. She had a smile on her face as she walked past his car, unaware of his presence. He watched as Caroline entered the bar. She was the first person he had seen that he actually knew. Getting out of the car, he followed her inside. Maybe she could tell him where Bonnie was. Once inside, he took a seat close to the door as he watched Caroline make out with Matt. He could have sworn he was the guy dating Elena before he left. Shaking his head, he wondered how much had changed already. He didn't listen in on their conversation. He simply waited until it looked like Caroline was about to leave. Caroline. He called her name just before she walked out the door. As she turned around, he noticed the look of confusion on her face as she saw him. How can I help you?" she asked with an eyebrow raised. "It's me, Elias," Elias said with a smile on his face, momentarily forgetting that he had changed the most in the last year. "Nah, last time I saw Elias he was about this tall." Caroline made to turn around and leave, but Elias stopped her with his next words. "You taught me how to kiss," Elias said, forcing her to freeze in her spot. "While Bonnie and Elena were doing their makeup, you would sneak into my room and teach me how to kiss." Turning around, Caroline took a look around the place, sighing as she noticed no one was looking their way. Grabbing Elias by the arm, she pulled him out of the bar before giving him a stern look. "You promised those words would never leave your mouth." Elias smiled. "Well, I had to convince you it was me." "Yeah, what happened to you anyway? The last time I saw you, you were so cute and lovable, now you're hot and beefy." Reaching out one of her fingers, she touched Elias' chest before quickly taking her hand away. "Let's just say puberty hit a lot harder for me. Now that I have your attention, I need to ask you a question," Elias said, turning serious. "Ask away," Caroline replied. "Where's Bonnie? Where's my Grams? The house is empty. I tried calling Bonnie, but I was sent straight to voicemail." Worry filled his voice as he spoke, and Caroline could hear it loud and clear. "Elias, you'll have to talk to Bonnie about all that. I can't tell you where she is, but I can take you there." "Thank you, Caroline." Elias spoke from the heart. He didn't know what he would do if something happened to either of them. "Only it'll have to wait. You remember Tyler?" Caroline asked with a sad smile on her face. Seeing Elias nod, she continued. His mother's in the hospital right now. He recently left town, so I don't think she has anyone to visit her. I'm heading over there first. Once I'm done, I'll take you straight to Bonnie. Okay, Elias let out a breath of air. Hop in, Caroline said, walking over to her car. It was a gray car, one that definitely didn't match up to Elias' car. Looking back at his car, he sighed, realizing it wouldn't be driven. Getting in Caroline's car, he sat back as she pulled out and headed towards the hospital. So where have you been all this time? Caroline asked as she looked up at a red light. Oh, my dad and I took a trip for the summer, only something unexpected came up, so I ended up staying with him for the school year. Caroline nodded as he finished speaking. Seeing her go silent, Elias took it as his turn to ask a question. How has Bonnie been? Bonnie's been. Bonnie, Caroline said, avoiding the subject. Seeing that he wasn't going to get any answers out of her, he decided to change the subject. What about Elena? After her parents' car accident, she became sheltered. Did you and Bonnie have any luck pulling her out of her shell? More like a boy did. Caroline scoffed lightly as she thought about it. Is that why I saw you with Matt? You two are a couple now. Yeah, I guess so. Elena broke up with Matt way before you left. Everyone thought it was because of her parents' death. But it turns out she just no longer saw him that way. I went through some things and Matt was there for me, that's why we're dating. Elias nodded as Caroline pulled to a stop just outside of the hospital. Well, I'll be right back unless you want to join me? Caroline asked, reaching for her purse and keys. No thanks, I don't really know Tyler's mom. I'll just make a phone call real quick while you're up there. Getting out of the car, he followed Caroline inside, only he didn't go any further. Pulling out his phone, he dialed a number by heart. Hello, he said as the other line picked up. Elias, how are you? Marin's voice came through the other end of the phone. I'm good, how's the college life? He asked with a smile on his face. I haven't actually started yet. Alan and I are exploring the city before school starts up. How's everyone back home? Well, they were fine yesterday. I think they'll be fine until Derek decided to join me in Mystic Falls. Elias shook his head and remembered how ecstatic Styles was to find out he'd be in charge. You're in Mystic Falls? Elias could hear the excitement in Marin's voice. Yeah, I'm visiting my family. Silence could now be heard from the other end of the phone, causing Elias to frown. Elias, I'm sorry I have to go. It was nice to hear from you. Have fun in Mystic Falls. Elias sighed as he lowered the phone from his ear. Trouble in paradise. Caroline's voice drew his attention. Turning around, he saw her looking at him with a grin on her face. Little Eli has a girlfriend. Just wait until I tell Bonnie. Elias smiled hearing her. He wouldn't mind telling Bonnie himself. Whether or not she would be happy for him would be a whole other topic of discussion. Are you ready to go? Caroline asked. Yep. Following her outside, he watched as she stopped just before reaching her car. Tyler? She asked, stopping in front of Tyler. Next to him was a woman with dirty blonde hair. Seeing Caroline's reaction, he could tell something had happened between them. Sighing, he made a decision. I'll give you two some alone time. Walking back towards the hospital, he took a seat inside. It was 5 minutes later when he decided to at least make sure Caroline hadn't forgotten him behind. Walking out of the hospital, he frowned seeing Caroline's purse laid out on the ground. Allowing his senses to take control, he frowned. He could feel it. Magic had been used here, and Caroline had been taken. The only witches he knew in town were his grandmother and potentially Bonnie. Only there was no way either of them would do this. This town really had changed since he left. They had left in a car. It would make them slightly harder to track, but only slightly. Using his sense of smell, he began to walk in a certain direction. If he used vamp speed, he was sure he would immediately lose track of the scent. He didn't keep track of time as followed the scent. It had led him out of town. He was getting close. He stopped as he heard someone else approaching. Vanishing in a show of speed, he reappeared far away enough to watch what was happening. A witch and a vampire got into a fight, with the vampire ultimately winning. Just when the vampire was going to walk away, a man appeared with a rifle in his hand. Elias laughed as the vampire quickly took him out before removing the bullets from the chamber of the gun. Wooden bullets? Elias frowned, realizing he had never thought about what effect they would have on the supernatural. It wasn't too long before Caroline and Tyler exited alongside the vampire. Elias watched as Tyler began to shift. Looking up, he frowned, realizing it was a full moon. He had thought that when he was talking with Caroline, it was just his worry that was making him angry. It was now obvious that it was the full moon. Gritting his teeth, he disappeared. Running into town, he quickly reached his car. Pulling out a bunch of chains, he charged towards the place Caroline and Tyler had just exited. Once inside, he chained himself up, waiting for the moon to take hold of his being. As he sat there alone, he suddenly missed being in Beacon Hills. During the time he would surely be with Styles Hell, even Scott would be a welcome addition. As Elias sat there, he thought peaceful thoughts. Keeping his heartbeat calm and steady was the key to gaining full control over his Lycan side. As he closed his eyes, he didn't notice himself being pulled into a spell. Elias. Opening his eyes, he was no longer in that tomb. No, now he stood in an open field. 3 circles of fire stood before him. He couldn't see what was inside of them. Off to the side there was a stone altar. Atop of it was a simple stone. Behind him, there was a pond or a lake. Elias. There it was again, that voice. Only now Elias recognized it. Grams. He called out, looking around the field. You have to protect her, Elias. She's headstrong like me, but you can't let her die. You have to protect her. Who? Grams, who do you want me to protect? She didn't respond. Instead, the wind began to blow as Bonnie walked out from the surrounding trees. She chanted a spell with a fierce look in her eyes. From her nose, tiny droplets of blood constantly fell. Soon it was too much, and the blood began to fall faster. She was killing herself. You have to stop her. No friends are more important than her life. Protect Bonnie, Elias. I'll do it, Grams. I'll do it, Elias said in a serious tone. This was why he was drawn here, to protect his sister. I love you, Elias. His Grams' voice rang out one final time before vanishing. Grams? Grams. Closing his eyes, he realized she was gone. When he opened them, he was back in the tomb. The moon was still at its peak, but he didn't care. Unlocking the chains, he dropped them to the ground. He wouldn't let the full moon be a problem any longer, not when Bonnie could be in trouble. That field, it was the key. Vanishing, he made his way outside. It was surrounded by trees. Looking around, he wondered which direction it was in. The pond he had looked at was another clue. He had never been, but he did remember Bonnie mentioning heading there with Elena and Caroline once or twice. Ritual location. Mikaelson stood behind Elena. He could smell the faint scent of lavender from her hair. Her body was tense. She was about to die, so he didn't think very much of it. This day had been something he yearned for since the day his family locked away his other half. Smiling slightly, he used one of his hands to hold Elena's hair, the other wrapped around her shoulder. Stefan watched on from the sidelines, too weak to do anything. He was forced to watch as the love of his life was ripped away from him. He couldn't wait any longer. Niklaus dug in. His fangs seeped into her neck, and he once again had the taste of the Petrova line. Magic coursed through her veins. He fell into a deep sense of tranquility. Veins began to pop from his eyes as he gripped Elena even tighter, almost as if he was afraid his meal would escape. Elena's eyelids fluttered as her eyes rolled to the back of her head. It wasn't too long before Klaus had sucked her dry. He released her body, allowing her to fall to the side. Like a can of Pepsi or a popsicle stick, he threw her to the side like trash. Blood dripped from his mouth as the flame in the bowl extinguished. I can feel it. It's happening. Klaus grinned as he looked up at the full moon. Crack! Suddenly his bones began to break as he started to transform. His eyes glowed yellow like a werewolf, but the veins of a vampire could be seen beneath them. Yes, yes. Like a ragdoll, Niklaus' body is thrown through the air. The flames in the bowl reignite, startling Greta. Bonnie's chants filled the area as she walked down the hill towards the ritual. Before Greta could react, Damon appeared in a gust of wind, snapping her neck. Kneeling down, he picked up Elena's body, moving her away from the center of the ritual. Phasmatos infero essere gratis. Disassustos vom. Mos pro je ta su te. Victimas veris. Phasmatos tribum, nia su exilum, disassustos vom, mos pro je ta su te. Levum, mina su te, disassustos vom, mos pro je ta su te. Phasmatos veris. Phase matos tribum, mos pro tes unum. Victas ex mellum, phasmatos vanum, mos pro je ta su te. In Latin, Bonnie chanted her spell. No. You are dead. Niklaus screamed out as he looked at Bonnie. Bonnie only glared at him as she continued chanting her spell. She watched as his body contorted as painful screams escaped his mouth. Damon carried Elena towards Stefan, lowering her down to his side. Reaching out his hand, Stefan gripped Elena's wrist. Elena, looking to his brother, he made a decision. I need you to get her out of here. What about you? Damon asked. I'm not leaving until he's dead, go. Picking Elena back up, Damon vanished in a show of speed. Sitting up, Stefan made sure to watch closely. He wanted to see Klaus die for what he had done to Elena. Bonnie continued to chant. Trees wavered as the wind picked up, showing how powerful the spell she was casting truly was. Niklaus screamed in pain as he crawled his way to a pile of rocks leaning against them. Elijah approached, looking down at his brother. When was the last time he had seen him so beaten? Surely it would have been when their father forced them to flee from New Orleans. Rebecca had been daggered not too long after. Elijah. Niklaus called out, confused. Hello, brother. Kneeling down, Elijah messed with the cufflink on his hand as he looked down at his younger brother. Stefan, who had been too weak to move earlier, stood for a better view. Walking over to Bonnie, he looked down at Klaus. Reaching out his hand, Elijah swiftly punched towards Niklaus' chest, gripping his still beating heart. Elias frowned as he sped towards the place he had seen in his talk with Grams. Finally spotting it, he noticed the raging fire, the crazy wind. Picking up his speed, he appeared at the tree line. Bonnie stood in the field. Behind her was a guy he had never seen before. Taking a closer look, his eyebrows furrowed in surprise. His uncle laid against a pile of rocks, looking worse for wear. A hand had pierced his chest, no doubt gripping his heart. What surprised him most was that it was his father's hand. Vanishing, he reappeared in front of Bonnie. Dad, what are you doing? Looking down at two of his biggest role models, he frowned. He had seen them argue. He had even seen them tussle, but he had never seen them on the verge of killing one another. What about family? They had told him about the bond. They shared the promises they had sworn to keep. Looking at them now, he wondered if it was all lies. Elias, back up, Bonnie's voice surprised him. He was sure there was no way she could recognize him. Sure, he had just called his dad, but he didn't remember her ever actually meeting him. Turning around, he smiled, seeing that she was okay. But he couldn't talk to her right now, not when his dad was on the verge of killing his uncle. You shouldn't be here, Elias, Elijah said, still gripping his brother's heart. You're about to kill Uncle Klaus. I think this is the perfect time for me to be here, Elias said with a bit of anger in his voice. You don't understand, Elias, Elijah said. Then explain it to me. Why are you trying to kill Uncle Klaus? Elias, you had an aunt, 2 more uncles. That was until Niklaus buried them at sea. Elijah turned back to look at his brother through narrowed eyes. Elias couldn't even think it. Turning to Niklaus, he was questioning if he was the same uncle he had believed him to be all this time. So Niklaus, in the name of our family. I didn't bury them at sea. Niklaus said, taking breaths. What? Elijah asked, looking down at his brother. Their bodies are safe. If you kill me, you'll never find them. Elijah, don't listen to him, he's lying, Stefan called out. No, he isn't, Elias said, looking at his uncle. He still wanted to believe that family meant something. Elijah, I can take you to them. I give you my word, brother. Niklaus spoke, causing Elijah to second-guess himself. Do it, and I'll take you both out, Bonnie said, surprising Elijah. You'll die. I don't care. Looking at Stefan and Bonnie, he stopped on Elias. If there was a chance his siblings were alive, he would find them so they could meet his son. I'm sorry, Elijah made to move, but Bonnie hadn't trusted he would follow through in the first place as she began to chant. Before Elijah could move, he was struck by pure energy. The wind picked up again. Bonnie made a decision she would kill them both. Elias frowned as he saw the blood began to fall from Bonnie's nose. "Bonnie, you have to stop." "I can't, Elias. Not after what they've done." He frowned at her words, speeding towards her. He noticed Stefan trying to step in his way. "Stay out of my family's business," he said, sending a slap his way. Ignoring his falling body, he appeared in front of Bonnie, grabbing her hands. "Bonnie, listen to me. If you kill them and die in the process, I'll have no one." He had already come to the conclusion that his Grams was dead. Only this was the first time he was speaking about it. How did she die? He asked as a tear fell from his face. "Like this," Bonnie said, stopping in her tracks. After opening the tomb, she had believed her Grams was okay. The amount of power they used was ultimately too much. Looking down at her little brother, a sad smile appeared on her face. He wasn't here, and she couldn't contact him to let him know. It was just the two of them now. As Bonnie stopped chanting, the spell faded away, and Elijah and Niklaus vanished. Bonnie reached out, pulling her brother into a hug. "So you're related to the Mikaelsons? I know right now you hate them, but once you get to know them, they're kind of hard not to like." Bonnie half chuckled at his words. 2 days later, Graham's house, Bonnie and Elias sat on the floor in front of the sofa watching TV. On the screen, Alex and Cam's twin sisters stopped in front of a bunch of jack-o'-lanterns before glancing at each other. "Pumpkins lack in style and grace," Cam said with a grin on her face. "Put a smile upon their face," her twin sister Alex finished as they both waved their pointer fingers in the air before sending a wave of magic at the jack-o'-lanterns. They marveled at their work, seeing the frowns on the pumpkins' faces become smiles. They continued walking forwards, not noticing the painter painting the sign in front of them. Just as they were walking past him, he slipped, sending his paint can flying in their direction. As the paint spilled out, both sisters raised their arms, magically stopping the paint as it was flying out of the can. "Yes, go Twitches, go Twitches." Bonnie's voice put a smile on Elias' face as he turned to look at her. She mimicked the twins on screen, dancing with a beautiful smile on her face. "We used to watch this movie all the time," Bonnie said, looking at her brother. She had missed this. Everything had become so crazy since Stefan and Damon appeared in town. Every day there was a new threat coming after their lives or terrorizing the neighborhood. This movie meant something to her. She had watched it so much as a little girl, and now she understood why. Because she was just like the twins on the TV. As a teenager, she all of a sudden realized she had magic. "Yeah, because you never let me pick the movie," Elias commented, looking at his sister, who had a knack for hogging the remote. "Yeah, because the 13th year was a better choice," Bonnie said, rolling her eyes. "And let's not act like I never let you pick the move." "Yeah, after we watched Twitches 1 and 2, Elias replied. "Well, they're good movies. You can't watch one and not the other," Bonnie said, laughing. Once the movie went off, Bonnie made to put on the second one, but Elias used vamp speed to take the remote. "Give it back," Bonnie found herself saying something that Elias had usually been the one to say in the past. "We'll watch the second one, but before we do, we need to talk. I need to know." Elias put the remote down next to him as a serious look appeared on his face. "Fine, but you have to promise not to do anything crazy after." Bonnie wasn't saying Elias was prone to do crazy things, but she was aware of what such news could do to anyone. "Okay, I promise," Elias said. 10 minutes later, Elias sat there leaning against the couch. His hands rested on his knees, a sullen look on his face. Next to him sat Bonnie. She leaned against him as she looked up at the ceiling. Damon, Stefan, and even Elena played a part. Bonnie's friendship with Elena was something he'd seen as long as he could remember. Neither of them knew what would happen. They should have left them to rot. He couldn't blame Bonnie. He couldn't even blame Elena. Damon and Stefan were the cause. Their appearance in this town had been the beginning of a lot of unfortunate events. He didn't know what he would do once he saw one of them. He hoped he didn't. He had promised Bonnie not to do anything crazy, but now he was wondering if he could keep such a promise. "It took me some time to forgive Elena, but she's my best friend. Without her, I don't know what I'd do," Bonnie said with a meek voice. Maybe she was still feeling some sense of guilt. It had been her that urged Grams into lifting the spell again. "It's not your fault, Bonnie. I don't blame you or Elena," Elias said softly. "Damon and Stefan?" Bonnie asked, hopeful. I don't know what I'll do when I see them, Elias scoffed, thinking about it. He was feeling angry. He didn't think he had felt this angry since that day. The day he watched his mother die right in front of his eyes. He remembered tearing the killer's throat apart and the blood that dripped from his mouth after. You can't kill them. Grams wouldn't want that, Bonnie said, looking at her brother. I know, that wasn't why she sent him here. It was to protect Bonnie, not from any vampire or threat, but from herself. She was willing to risk it all as long as it left her friends happy. Changing her would be impossible. She loved deeply, a side effect of a troubled childhood. She had abandonment issues, which made her want to keep those she loved close even if that meant dying for them. If he couldn't fix her, he would need to find some other way. A way for her to use her magic without risking her own life. Thinking about it, he had only seen one which used her magic with reckless abandonment. Peter's nurse. Why could she do that? The branch that was always in her hand. Didn't Deaton mention something about her channeling, or was that Niklaus? He wasn't sure, but that branch allowed her to ignore the fatal effects of overuse of one's own magic. With something like that, he wouldn't have to worry about Bonnie's well-being. His own neck had been snapped by Peter's nurse. Regular vampires wouldn't stand a chance. Knock knock, Bonnie, it's Stefan, I need your help. Before Bonnie could react, Elias vanished, reappearing at the door, swinging it open as he grabbed Stefan by the neck. Why shouldn't I rip your heart from your chest? Elias said as his eyes glowed a bloody red. Elias. Bonnie rushed to the door, placing a hand on his arm and one on his shoulder. You promised, she said, looking up at her little brother. Turning to look at his sister, Elias let out a sigh before dropping Stefan. His eyes still glowed red as he looked down at him, showing his disdain. Walking back over to the couch, he took a seat, ignoring both Stefan and Bonnie. I'm sorry about that, Stefan, come in. Helping Stefan up, Bonnie led him further into the house, stopping at the kitchen table. Taking a seat, Stefan rubbed his neck as he wondered what he had done to upset Elias. What I do to him, he said, looking up at Bonnie, who leaned against the kitchen counter. To save you and Damon. My Grams exhausted her magic. He's just now finding out. She was his Grams too. Stefan nodded. I get it. So wait, he's your brother? Elena told me you had a brother, but wasn't he a little kid? Stefan asked, confused. Something's happened. You're a vampire, I'm a witch, he's a Mikaelson who knows how that works, Bonnie replied, just as confused on the subject. Elias had told her the gist of it, but it was still a headache to wrap her head around. That's not why you're here though, are you? Bonnie asked. No, I'm here for Damon. Yesterday when saving Caroline from Klaus, which he got bit by Tyler Lockwood. That was news to Bonnie, news she wasn't exactly sure how to feel about. Elena's relationship with the Salvatore brothers wasn't something she knew how to feel about. They had been the reason her Grams died, so did she deep down feel some kind of relief? She wasn't sure. What do you need? Bonnie asked. I want you to try and find a cure. Maybe the old Bennett witches have the answer? I'll meet you there, Bonnie replied. Stefan nodded, seeing that Bonnie was currently still wearing pajamas. She had been missing for the past 2 days. No doubt catching up with her younger brother, who was a mystery to almost anyone that had shown up after he left the city. Taking a deep breath, he entered the living room, seeing Elias still sitting on the couch. He didn't look at Stefan as if he didn't exist. Being alone in a room with him reminded him of how it felt to be alone with Elijah or Klaus. Suffocating pressure. He didn't blame the kid. Damon's obsession with Catherine had been the reason Shalia Bennett died. The stupid part was the fact that she wasn't even in the tomb. Once Stefan was gone, Bonnie entered the living room. She could read Elias. Right now he was angry but trying to hide it. Unfortunately, we won't be able to watch the second twitches right now. I have to leave, they need my help. Bonnie walked over to the couch, grabbing the remote before quickly turning off the TV. You're coming with me. Where to? Elias asked, curious. Bonnie only smiled in response. Old Witch's house. Elias parked his car just outside of the building, looking at the old white house covered in moss and trees. This is the place? Elias asked with surprise on his face. Don't underestimate it. This place holds a story, Bonnie spoke mysteriously, getting out of the car. Elias sighed, watching as Bonnie walked to the front of the car before stopping and waving for him to join her. Getting out of the car, he walked over to the hood of the car, looking at the house. Over 100 witches were burnt in this very field. This house holds their powers, the powers of the Bennett witches. Elias could see the pride in Bonnie's eyes as she talked about the house. He himself had learned from a young age that the world was a cruel place. This house was a testament to that. "Well, let's enter," Bonnie said, pulling Elias along. She entered first, turning around to see what kind of reaction the ancestors would have to Elias. As he took his first step and he felt it, the magic in this house was astounding. The magic didn't feel like a wall. No, it felt more like a calm breeze welcoming him in. Taking another step in, he felt like he was walking on air. In here, as long as the Bennett witches allowed it, Bonnie would be unstoppable. He could feel it. Bonnie didn't say anything, seeing Elias enter so easily. It was obvious he wasn't normal. It wasn't too long before another pair of footsteps could be heard from outside. Stefan entered wearing a black jacket and a black shirt beneath it. Elias narrowed his eyes, seeing him, something Bonnie quickly noticed. "Play nice. Once I've done the spell, he's gone. After that, I'll take you to meet someone special to me." Elias didn't respond, deciding to take a look around instead. He could tell this place was in the need for a few touch-ups. Bonnie had magic, and she had probably never thought about using it to clean up this place. Bonnie, on the other hand, leaned down, picking up the fallen-down candle on the ground. Looking at Stefan, she let out a breath of air. "I'm not sure this is going to work." Pursing his lips, Stefan tilted his head, looking at Bonnie. "You've done a seance before, right?" "Contacted Emily Bennett. Maybe one of the witches might know how to help Damon. Let's just hope they want to." Closing her eyes, Bonnie began to chant a spell in Latin. As she did, the candles in the house ignited as voices began to whisper in the surroundings. "Bonnie? Bonnie." Stefan calls out. Opening her eyes, Bonnie said one name. "Emily." Elias turned to her, watching as another voice began to speak through her. "Why have you come here, Stefan?" Emily Bennett spoke. "I need your help. I need to know if there's a spell that can heal a werewolf bite." Emily makes to speak, but suddenly she let out a breath of air, and both Elias and Stefan could feel it. Whoever had taken over was strong. It was a suffocating strength that made even Elias sweat. "Mikaelson is the answer to your question. Now leave." Her voice was like the sound of thunder. Stefan didn't wait immediately, vamp speeding out of the burial ground. Turning to Elias, a sad smile appeared on her face. "My sweet little Eli." "Mom?" Elias asked hesitantly. "I'm sorry, Eli, you weren't supposed to see me die." The sadness could literally be heard in her voice as she walked towards Elias. "It's okay, Mom. I've long since come to terms with what happened, thanks to Dad, Uncle Klaus, and most of all, Grams." Placing a hand on her son's cheek, she smiled. "The one thing your father's done right is allowing Shalia to raise you." Pulling her son into a hug, she closed her eyes as tears began to fall from her eyes. "Now listen closely, Elias, because I don't have much time. Don't let the Nemeton's vitality be renourished. All kinds of hell will arrive if you do." "What does that mean?" Elias asked with a frown on his face. "I was supposed to be back by now. To be a part of your life instead of being forced to watch as you grow. I hope you'll forgive Mama one day. I haven't found what I'm looking for yet. I promise when I come back I'll tell you everything." "Mom." Elias called out. "Bonnie may not be your sister, but you still have the same blood. Protect this foolish girl from herself." Those were the last words of hers he heard before Bonnie suddenly fell over to the side, almost fainting. Rushing over to her, he caught her before she fell. "What happened?" Bonnie asked, looking up at Elias. "I talked with my mom." Elias said with a smile on his face. "What?" Bonnie said in confusion. "But that would mean she's a Bennett." "I guess she is," Elias said, helping Bonnie up to her feet. "Do you think your father knew? And that's why he dropped you off at Graham's that day?" Bonnie asked. "I don't think he knew, but I think Grams did. How are you feeling?" he asked, changing the subject. "I usually feel lightheaded after doing that, but right now I feel fine." Bonnie frowned, wondering why it was different this time. "Where's Stefan?" she asked, looking around. My mom sent him away. Elias replied. He didn't currently want Bonnie to know that his father and uncle were back in town. He had seen the lengths she would go to kill them. It was best they kept their distance for now. Well, since he's gone, we can head over to Jeremy's. I think you'll like him. Bonnie smiled, reaching for Elias' arm. Elena's house, right? He asked, getting a nod. You take the car. I have to stop somewhere first. I'll meet you there. He didn't give Bonnie a chance to ask questions, placing the car keys in her hands and vanishing from her sight. Before leaving, Bonnie took a look around the place, feeling something different within the burial ground. She had questions, but she didn't think any of the witches here could give her the answers. Elias sped through the town, following Stefan's scent. Entering an apartment building, he rushed up the stairs, stopping at an ajar door. You just keep popping up, don't you? The voice of his uncle destroyed all of his doubts. They were both here. He's like a bug, him and his brother. I'd crush them myself if I hadn't promised Bonnie I wouldn't. Elias pushed the door open, surprising both his father and uncle. While his father seemed happy to see him, Klaus seemed off-put by his presence before a smirk appeared on his face. Dear nephew, tell me, what have the Salvatore brothers done to earn your ire? Niklaus asked with a raised eyebrow. They got my Grams killed. All for her and Elena, but Elias didn't think she was worth mentioning as he pointed a finger at Catherine. Hey, I wasn't even in town when the Bennett witch died, Catherine said, feigning innocence. You making us believe you were trapped down there for over 100 years played no part in it. Stefan said, causing Catherine to roll her eyes. Poor Sheila, Niklaus said. You have my condolences, dear nephew. She raised you like one of her own, for that she'll always be dear to me. Thank you, Uncle Klaus. Niklaus nodded in response. Your Grams was an amazing woman, Elijah said, stepping towards his son, placing a hand on his shoulder. When I couldn't provide you with warmth and understanding, she did. Without her help, who knows how you would have turned out. She's gone, but you have to know she lives on inside of you, son. Thank you, father. Elias knew he was right, even if he wasn't exactly talking about her magic. She had already helped him save Bonnie. Without her help, he would have lost them both. Brother, would you be kind enough to make sure those two don't leave? I need to have a chat with Elias. Niklaus asked, causing Elijah to frown. I've already given my word. What more do you want? Niklaus said, just a tad bit annoyed. Go, Elijah said with a stiff face. Niklaus pulled Elias into the hallway before vamp speeding away. Frowning at his uncle's antics, Elias chased after him. It wasn't too long before they stopped at a bench in the park. Peter Hale's dead? Niklaus asked, looking at his nephew. Derek killed him. He's an alpha but still a part of my pack, Elias said, getting a nod from his uncle. I'll be honest, I envy the red eyes, Niklaus said, causing Elias to smile. Would you like the bite, uncle? I'm sure finding some rogue alpha and taking his status will be a piece of cake for you. Elias said jokingly. Niklaus thought about it for a second before ultimately shaking his head. He had seen Kate. The bit hadn't made her a werewolf, but something else completely. He knew his own nature and couldn't trust that fate wouldn't play the same trick on him. I know you probably think I'm some god-awful monster after finding out about our siblings. But I can guarantee you, Elias, I've never intended on killing them. Every day I think about freeing them, but the things they'll do once free don't bode well for the world. Elijah doesn't see it the same way. I'll take him to them. It'll be up to him to rehabilitate them with the ways of the world. Niklaus sighed, standing up from the bench. It could be a while before your father returns. Our siblings can be quite the headache. And Elias, I do hope you'll forgive me one day. Niklaus nodded solemnly to his nephew before he vanished, leaving Ellis to his own thoughts. He didn't know how he was supposed to feel. He had more family. Sure, according to Klaus, they were just as bad as him, maybe even worse, but they were family. He didn't know everything, but he had a feeling that however Niklaus was keeping them, it wasn't very comfortable. Standing up, he vamped speed towards Elena's house. Niklaus entered the apartment building, annoyed at himself. Annoyed at Elijah for making him do this. Had he just stayed the ever-loyal brother, he wouldn't have to lie to Elias' face. He wouldn't have to take his father away. He wouldn't have to dagger the brother that had stayed by his side through thick and thin. Opening the door, he sped into the room, grabbing the dagger before sticking it into his brother's chest. Catching him as he fell to the floor, he looked into Elijah's eyes. "You asked to be reunited with our family, and so you will be." "Elias needs to." Elijah reached up, gripping Niklaus's neck. "Don't worry about Elias. He thinks you'll be helping our siblings reconnect with the current world. It pains me to deceive him like this, but you left me no choice, brother." Laying Elijah down on the ground, he turned to look at the shocked vampires standing before him. "I like to keep my promises." Ding! Stopping in his tracks, Elias pulls out his mobile phone. Town Square. They're showing a movie using a projector. Nodding his head, he changed directions. The crowd of people using blankets as pallets filled the town square. Some had popcorn, drinks, and snacks. Some had pillows. Walking over to Bonnie, he was surprised to find Caroline, along with a guy he was pretty sure he was Jeremy. "Elias, meet Jeremy." "Jeremy, meet Elias," Bonnie said with a full smile. Elias reached his hand out, shaking Jeremy's hand, making sure his grip was tight. He didn't need to say any words for Jeremy to get his point. In the past, he would have surely looked like a brat doing this to one of Bonnie's boyfriends. Now, although he was the younger brother, he didn't completely look it. "You've met Bonnie's boyfriend. When will she meet your girlfriend?" Caroline asked with a smile on her face. "You have a girlfriend?" Bonnie asked, narrowing her eyes at her brother. Mouthing the words thank you to Caroline, Elias turned his attention back to Bonnie. "You've met her before." "Who is she?" Bonnie asked once again. "Do you remember Marin? She stayed a summer with Grams when we were younger." Elias asked. "Her? She's older than me." Bonnie wanted to continue, but Caroline cut her off. "Bonnie, calm down. She's a regular human, and it's not like she tricked Elias into dating her. Right?" Caroline asked, raising an eyebrow. "She didn't trick me." The sound of Jeremy's phone ringing gave Elias time to breathe. He had expected Bonnie to be curious, but he didn't expect her to be like that. He didn't know Jeremy, but she didn't see him going all crazy. Inside he knew she simply cared, so he wasn't angry, just a little taken back. "Alaric, hey," Jeremy said, turning his phone on to speaker mode. "Tell me you're with Elena," Alaric said, sounding worried. "She went to see Damon." "I thought that's where you were," Jeremy said on his phone. "No, he just escaped. I think he's looking for her, and the cops are after him." "Listen, he's in bad shape, Jeremy, so if you find her, get her somewhere safe, okay? I'm on my way." With those final words, he hung up the phone, leaving behind a worried group, well besides Elias. "If Damon is off the rails, there's nothing you can do to stop him. Let us take care of it," Bonnie said, looking at Jeremy. "No, you keep doing this. You left me behind before, and guess what? Jenna still died. Now I'm going to find my sister. You go ahead and try to stop me." Seeing Jeremy leave, Bonnie was left dumbfounded. She just wanted to keep him safe. Elias signed, realizing it wasn't just a Beacon Hills thing. Teenagers, himself included, were just dumb sometimes. A few minutes after they split off from Jeremy, they heard the sound of a gunshot coming from the Mystic Grill. Bonnie and Caroline charged in first, with Elias just behind them. Jeremy, who Bonnie had just warned had suffered a single gunshot wound to the chest. Holding his head up was Sheriff Forbes, who Elias had the chance of meeting before while growing up in Mystic Falls. "Jeremy!" Bonnie yelled, rushing over to Jeremy alongside Caroline. They both kneeled down to his side as Elias watched on. Mom, what did you do?" Caroline asked, looking down at the blood coming from Jeremy's chest. "I was aiming for Damon," Sheriff Forbes said hysterically. "He still has his ring," Caroline said, looking down at the ring that would bring any normal human back to life after being killed by a supernatural. "She's human. The ring won't work on him, Caroline," Bonnie said as tears fell from her eyes. "I got it," Caroline said, biting her wrist before trying to use her blood to heal him. Elias didn't know Jeremy, but he could tell Bonnie was hurting. Judging by Jeremy's heartbeat, Caroline's blood wouldn't be helpful. "Come on, Jeremy. Just drink. Go on, Jeremy, drink." From Elias' point of view, it was too late. Only Caroline didn't think the same. Jeremy's body remained motionless. The blood was having no effect. He was dead. What are you doing? Sheriff Forbes asked, having no idea of the healing effects vampire blood had on regular humans. I'm trying to help him. Jeremy, drink. Caroline said. Bonnie. What's going on? A middle-aged man entered, and upon seeing Jeremy, he was shocked. Oh my God. I know what I need to do, Elias. Grab him, he's coming with us. Seeing Bonnie's eyes, Elias didn't ask any questions. Picking up Jeremy's body, he ignored the sheriff's words about it being a crime scene as he followed Bonnie outside. Laying Jeremy in the back seat, Elias watched as Bonnie climbed in the back seat with him, using her legs as a pillow. Drive to the old witch house, Elias nodded, but frowned upon hearing someone knocking on the window. Alaric? Bonnie asked with a tearful frown. I'm coming too. It's my job to look after him. Alaric immediately climbed into the passenger seat. Elias pulled off, knowing that his car would have gotten them there faster. It was just too bad that it was only a two-seater. Thinking about it now, he more often used Styles' Jeep because it allowed for everyone to drive along. He wondered if he should get a new car or not. Shaking his head, he realized this was not the time to be thinking about getting a new car. Sure, he had no interest in whether Jeremy stayed dead or not, but he didn't want Bonnie to be sad. Stopping the car, he climbed out of the front seat, quickly picking up Jeremy at Bonnie's request. He followed her inside as she told him where to place Jeremy. Alaric asked a question. Is what you're planning going to work? There's a spell for it, if they'll give me the power to use it. Bonnie kneeled down to Jeremy's side, placing his head in her lap. She began to chant. Victus phasmatis ex elito. Revertus phasmatis ut victus. Victus phasmatis ex elito. Revertus phasmatis ut victus. No, Bonnie yelled out, causing both Alaric and Elias to frown. What's wrong? Alaric asked. They don't want to help. They said there'll be consequences, Bonnie said in disarray as she continued to listen to the voices. Well, he's just a kid. Tell them to shut up. I'll do it, Bonnie said to the witches. No, Elias called out. What do you mean no? Alaric asked, confused. What are the consequences? Elias asked, looking at Bonnie. In response, she only shook her head. Bonnie, what are the consequences? He asked again, only for her to ignore him as she shut her eyes and began to chant once again. Victus phasmatis ex elito. Revertus phasmatis ut victus. Victus phasmatis ex elito. Revertus phasmatis ut victus. Revertus phasmatis ut victus. Victus phasmatis ex elito. Revertus. As Bonnie continued chanting, the building began to shake. The words of the ancestors grew loud enough so that even Elias could hear them. Elias, they want her life. There is always a balance in nature. A life for a life. The amount of magic needed to cast this spell isn't something Bonnie has. She'll overexhaust her magic and die like Sheila. Elias could hear the voice of his mother coming from the room. I'll stop her, Elias said, almost vamp speeding to Bonnie. No, there's another way, his mother said. Magic can be channeled. Like you saw the witch do in Beacon Hills with the branch. Your body is a vessel full of magic. Allow Bonnie to channel you and she'll be fine. Nodding his head, Elias charged, and blood had already begun to drip from Bonnie's nose, so he didn't have much time. Bonnie. Open your eyes, Bonnie. Shaking her, he watched as her eyes opened slowly, only she kept chanting. I'm sorry, Elias. Bonnie, channel me, Elias said. Upon seeing Bonnie's confusion, he said it again. Channel me. I'm a Lycan vampire hybrid. Magic is a part of me. Channel me. Bonnie's confusion faded away as she grabbed both of Elias' hands. Magic like she had never felt before filtered through her bones. The spell that even with the help of the witches would have left her bleeding out had become as simple as a pyrokinesis spell. Ag, Elias felt a terrible headache hit him. It was like energy was being pulled from his body. He powered through, knowing the alternative would be much worse. Bonnie's grip tightened upon hearing her brother's pain. Great power came with a hell of a lot of pain. She was channeling him, but the cost was excruciating pain. Finishing the chant, she immediately dropped his hands. No, she called out, feeling the magic leave the room. The witches were gone. Elias, they're gone. Your mom. Bonnie didn't know what else to say. It's okay, Bonnie. Did it suck that his mom hadn't mentioned that one of the consequences would be the old witch ancestors leaving? Yes, he had only talked to her twice. The first time had only left him more questions, and the second one made him realize she had been watching his whole life. Maybe she was watching right now. Looking around the room, he whispered thank you before walking off to the side, leaning against the wall. Are you okay? Bonnie asked, blood still dripping from her nose. I'll be okay, Elias said with a sigh. He had never had a hangover, but he reckoned this was what it felt like. He's waking up. Alaric's voice was filled with excitement. Bonnie made to turn around, but stopped and looked at Elias, worry and a hint of guilt on her face. I'm okay, go. Your boyfriend just came back from the dead. We'll talk later. Elias watched as she smiled before turning around and hugging her boyfriend. Bonnie was reckless. Too reckless. Elias didn't like it. Soon it would be the death of her. His mother had given him an idea, though. She needed an object she could channel so that she wouldn't have to risk dying to pull off the impossible. The branch was the perfect object. Finding Peter's nurse wouldn't be easy, though. Not to mention he couldn't do that in Mystic Falls. He had a feeling this place would be full of drama. Meanwhile, Beacon Hills was free of all this drama. Later, Bonnie, we need to talk. Elias looked to the other side of the sofa. Bonnie turned his way, a sort of anxious confusion on her face. What do you want to talk about? Bonnie asked. Today has been a horrible mess. Besides twitches, this day has given us nothing but grief. Elias had never actually agreed with Scott's take on just wanting a regular life. It was too late for that. Now his days consisted of witches, werewolves, and good old vampires. I don't think anyone died, Bonnie said with a smile on her face. Bonnie, I'm leaving Mystic Falls. What? No. You just got here, you can't leave already. She had just gotten her brother back. She wasn't ready to give him up again. Not now, not when he was all she had left. Which is why I think you should come with me. Beacon Hills should be relatively safe right about now. It's what you need. What do you mean it's what I need? Confusion appeared on her face as she thought about his words. Things seemed to be going relatively okay, besides the fact that 2 original vampires were currently in town. Bonnie, I've been here less than a week, and you've tried to sacrifice yourself twice. I respect your willingness to do the impossible for your friends, but what about me? I hate to say it, but you're my only actual living family. Who will I come to for warm hugs? How about actual advice that doesn't include murdering and feeding upon the masses? Elias asked, staring at his sister with a frown on his face. He hated seeing her give her all for people he wasn't sure would return the favor. Okay, I'll go with you. Vampires, werewolves, and witches, they all exist. Allison opened her eyes, remembering Scott's words. It had been a couple of days since she had last seen him. She simply needed a bit of space, time to take in and comprehend all the information he had given her. While she contemplated the supernatural, the atmosphere in her house has been weird for the last few days. Dinner's ready, sweetheart. Her mother's voice drew her from her thoughts as she turned to look at her room door. Her mother peeked inside, holding the door handle with a smile on her face. But Allison wasn't hungry. She wanted to be left alone with her own thoughts. I'm not hungry, she said before turning her head back to look at the ceiling. Ah, honey, what's wrong? Her mother entered the room, taking a seat on her bed. Things have been so crazy since Aunt Kate left, Allison said, still feeling weird about her leaving. Ever since she could remember, her Aunt Kate was more like a sister to her. Deep down she knew Kate wouldn't leave, not without saying goodbye. Yes, they have, her mother said, but they won't be soon. Your grandfather is coming for a visit, so while I understand you're not hungry right now and you want to be alone, all of that's fine. But when he arrives, you will join us for dinner. Do you understand? Her mother's eyes narrowed as Allison saw a side of her mother she wasn't used to seeing. The smile was gone, a face that lacked emotion was the only thing left to greet her. I understand, she replied, knowing deep down it was the easiest of options. She didn't know what to think of her grandfather. She barely knew the man. The last time she had seen him had been so long ago, she only remembered his small stature and kind smile. Something told her there was something hidden behind that kind smile. Good, don't stay up too late. Her mother returned to her regular self as a happy smile appeared on her face. Allison went back to her thoughts, only now there were more questions. Everything she once knew was now being questioned. Scott hadn't only revealed the supernatural to her. He had pulled a curtain down from her eyes, allowing her to see and question the things she once thought were normal. Derek Hale looked down at the 3 teenagers he had chosen to join his pack. First was Isaac Leahy, a troubled teenager with an abusive father. Troubled was an understatement. Isaac had something Derek felt necessary for his pack. Isaac was kind, but so broken that he hid within himself. His fear was something Derek pitied. Knowing what the boy's father had put him through, Derek offered him a chance to change his life. He was someone who had seen the terrors of the world, and yet even with a bite he didn't become corrupted. Isaac was a loner at school. He could fit into every circle, even with him being over 6 feet tall. Before the bite, he shied away from conversations and hunched over. Even now, those instincts he created to survive his father's abuse controlled him. Isaac had a tendency to freeze in the face of fear. After that, his body would begin to shake as he watched on in horror. Next up was Erica Reyes, a young teenage girl being held back by her own sickness. A severe case of epilepsy forced her into a shell. After surviving the bite, she broke from her shell like a caterpillar, becoming a butterfly. The shy and insecure girl she was before vanished. Now her blonde hair flowed down her back instead of matting against her head due to sweat. Her sickly-looking eyes had been replaced with vibrant green eyes. With her new looks, a sort of confidence appeared within her. But with every advantage, there was a disadvantage. Derek sighed while looking at her. Her epilepsy had made it hard for her to make friends. Like Isaac, she had her own trauma, and because of that trauma, she was a bit lacking in other areas. She was immature and quick to anger. Derek could only describe her as prom queen material, the kind of prom queen that would ruin her own party if things didn't go her way. That's where Derek's next choice of betas came in. It was because of Boyd that Derek was so confident in choosing Boyd. These two had somehow become friends, and that bond was something Derek found useful. Boyd was a loner. In a school that prioritized lacrosse, Boyd looked like he belonged on a football team. African American and built like a tank. There wasn't much going for Boyd, raised by a single mother and had a sort of hate for making friends. His inability to connect with others was something Derek found troubling. Had it not been for Erica's begging, he wasn't sure if he would have chosen Boyd. Derek hadn't discovered it yet, but he was sure there was a reason Boyd had decided to accept his offer. Once he had received the bite, Derek threw all of that out the window. He had gotten lucky. Body, unlike Isaac and Erica, had a gift. He had an unnatural amount of strength. Derek was sure he would give an alpha a run for his money, let alone other betas like Erica and Isaac. They would do for now. His only worry would be the next full moon. He had 3 weeks to get them ready. He was glad he hadn't turned them a couple of days before as Elias had done. Styles hummed to a song as he read up on the originals. All throughout the internet, there were bits and pieces of their legends. Without confirmation from Elias, he'd have to take most of it with a grain of salt. Everything just seemed so impossible. He couldn't think about living for 1,000 years. He was so focused on his computer screen that he didn't notice his room door open. He didn't hear the footsteps creeping closer. He didn't notice the pale ashen hand reaching for his shoulder. He screamed in a high-pitched manner, turning to look at the culprit. The sound vanished when he realized who it was. His father stared at him, almost creeped out. Styles wasn't sure if that was because of the high-pitched scream or the look of horror on his face when he turned around. "Dad? What's up?" Styles asked to Hope to change the subject. "Don't you have super hearing? How didn't you notice me enter the room?" The sheriff asked with a raised eyebrow. "It's only active when I need it. How annoying would it be if I couldn't turn it off?" The only person Styles could think of was Superman, but didn't he also have the ability to toggle it on or off? He wasn't sure. "What's that?" Styles asked, looking at the folder in the hand of his father. "There was a murder tonight, only I get the feeling it was paranormal." Styles heard that word come from his father's mouth. "You mean supernatural?" His father seemed taken back by his response before he eyes him weirdly. "I could have sworn you used the word paranormal when you were telling me about it. So no ghost?" The sheriff asked. Not that I know of, Styles shrugged before snatching the folder from his father's hand. He opened the folder, looking at an assortment of pictures. A middle-aged man lay dead in the middle of the street. A hole in the abdomen seemed like he was pierced by something. There was another picture of a vehicle where only the front driver's door had been ripped from the vehicle. The next picture showed a slit on the back of the neck of the dead man. Styles could see what seemed like saliva dripping from the slit of the neck. We have a suspect, but I don't think he did it. The sheriff reached over to the folder, reaching under the stack of documents and pulling out a picture. His name is Isaac Leahy. He goes to Beacon Hills High School. Do you know him? Styles looked at the picture for a second before remembering his name and face. He was on the lacrosse team. He was usually on the bench alongside Styles. He seemed to be there just to have an after-school activity. Yes, but we aren't friends. I only remember him because of lacrosse. The sheriff nodded before grabbing the picture of the dead man. Well, this is his father, and let me tell you, he was in hysterics when we found them both. He's a kid, and like I said, I don't think he did this. But I'll need more information before I can make a formal decision. Let me know if you see anything supernatural that can help. The sheriff reached over Styles' desk, grabbed all the pictures, and placed them back in the folder. He headed for the door, leaving Styles to his computer. "Dad," Styles called out, stopping his dad at the door. "Thanks for trusting me with this." The sheriff smiled before speaking. "Who else am I gonna trust? The only other person I could ask was Deaton, and I'm not really a fan of riddles." "Wait, he knows, doesn't he?" The sheriff asked as if suddenly enlightened. Styles only nodded. "Son of a bitch knew what was going on the whole time and led me in circles." The sheriff cursed under his breath as Styles did his best not to laugh. Looking up at his son, he smiled, seeing him hold back his laughter. "Good night, Styles." "Night, Dad." Derek frowned as he stepped into the police station. Isaac had used his one phone call to call him. Inside, he was feeling a tad bit guilty. He was aware of Isaac's abusive father. It had been one of the biggest reasons he had chosen Isaac. Looking back now, he wondered if he made the right choice. Giving a person the power to stand up to his demons. What did Derek expect to happen? Anger was a powerful thing, especially to a werewolf. What were the chances that Isaac got so angry he couldn't control himself? Derek shook his head, walking up to the front desk, but before he could ask the lady a question, he heard a voice. "Derek." Looking over, he saw the sheriff waving him over. Next to him was someone Derek hadn't expected to see, Styles. Opening his office door, the sheriff led Derek and Styles into his office. He motioned for Derek to take a seat, which he did. "What's your relationship with Isaac Leahy? He used his one phone call on you." "I don't think that concerns you, Sheriff," Derek said through narrowed eyes. "Listen here, Derek. There's a chance Isaac was the one to kill his father. Only judging by the wounds on his body and the shape of the vehicle, I don't think he could pull it off. Were you there last night? Did becoming an alpha give your claws some kind of paralytic venom?" Derek froze upon hearing that question before turning to look at Styles. "Elias told me I could tell him." Styles shrugged, seeing Derek glare at him. "No, I wasn't there, and no, my claws don't have paralytic venom. But if you let me speak to Isaac, I can tell you whether he did it or not." "How are you going to do that?" the sheriff asked. "Dude, can you compel people now?" Styles asked in glee. "No, I'm still a werewolf, even if I did become an alpha," Derek answered, shaking his head at Styles. "Compel people? What are you talking about?" The sheriff looked at his son, lost. "I'll tell you about it later." "Isaac is part of my pack. He's a werewolf," Derek said, shocking both the sheriff and Styles. "Does Elias know you're making more?" Styles asked through narrowed eyes. "It was part of the deal. As long as he didn't have to watch over them, I could turn as many as I like." "I hope you're not turning people against their will. The last thing this town needs is another psychotic Hale." Derek narrowed his eyes upon hearing the sheriff's words. It seemed Styles had told him just about everything. "Yes, I know about your Uncle Peter. I'm not turning anyone against their will. Isaac chose this even after I warned him of the drawbacks. He hasn't shown any abnormal signs of anger. In fact, he's shown potential. I don't think he killed his father, and judging from your question about the paralytic venom, neither do you." "We don't think he did it either, but he'll only talk to you," Styles said with a sigh. "Lead the way," Derek said. causing the father-son duo to look at each other before nodding. They led him further back into the police station until they reached a pair of holding cells. Inside, Isaac sat on the metal bench with his head in his arms as he looked down at the floor. He seemed to hear them enter as he looked up and smiled upon seeing Derek. He walked over to the bars of the cell, wrapping his hands around them. "Isaac, I need you to tell me what happened that night," Derek said, watching as Isaac turned to Styles and his father, hesitation in his eyes. "It's okay, I trust them." Derek knew that his own trust was all that mattered. Isaac would respect whatever decision he made. Tightening his grip on the bars, Isaac nodded. Taking in a deep breath, he began to speak. "My dad made dinner last night. Chicken and rice." Last night, Isaac sat across from his father in their pretty big dining room. They sat at a square brown table that could sit around 4 people. Isaac kept his head down the whole time, just trying to get through dinner. He had been waiting for the inevitable day when his final report card would finally arrive. He knew how his father would react: anger. A kind of anger that made Isaac shake in fear. He cursed his past self, the one that did his best to study and still failed to get a good grade. He consoled himself by remembering that it was impossible to be good at everything. Unfortunately, math seemed to be the reason he was sometimes locked inside a freezer. Of course, he was claustrophobic. Who wouldn't be if that was their punishment as a kid? Clink. Looking down at his plate, he realized that the sound had come from his fork hitting the plate. His food was gone. He had eaten it all already. Suddenly, he remembered Derek's warning. "Your appetite may become larger, it's expected. The things you'll be able to do after surviving the bite take a lot out of your body. It'll need the nutrition." He wasn't full. Looking over at his father, he realized he had also finished his food. Isaac frowned upon realizing that. Reaching up for the table, he made to push his chair backwards so that he could stand up, but his father's voice stopped him. "Son, we need to have a chat." "What do you want to chat about?" Isaac asked, already knowing the answer. "Your school sent over your final report card and it's mostly A's except for math. You want to tell me why you have a D in math?" His father took a sip from his cup as he unfolded the report card in his hand. Holding it up, he showed the D to Isaac. "I can explain," Isaac said, hoping for a chance to avoid what was coming. "You don't need to explain, I get it. School's tough, especially math. Hell, even I struggled with it back in the day. Just do the dishes tonight, maybe cut the grass tomorrow, and we're done with it." Isaac sighed in relief upon hearing his words. Yeah, math was hell. He was glad his father understood. "Okay, I'll do the dishes and cut the grass tomorrow." "Good," his father said with a smile on his face. He took another sip from his cup as he eyes Isaac. Standing up, Isaac grabbed the dishes, reaching for his father's cup. He flinched when he stopped him. "I'm still using this, just wash those." Isaac nodded. Heading into the kitchen, he began running the water for the dishes when his father entered the kitchen. "You know what, I take it back." His father narrowed his eyes as he sipped from his cup again. "Yes, school's hard, but you're smarter than me. You have the chance to really make something of yourself, and you waste it." Spit flew from his mouth as he waved his hand. Isaac looked at him with no idea what to say. No words that he could possibly say would stop the anger. Not now. "You need to do better. Maybe quitting lacrosse is what's best for you." "No," Isaac regretted the words, just as they left his mouth. "No? Boy, who are you telling no?" Isaac watched as the glass cup in his father's hand flew towards him. It was almost in slow motion, and just the tiniest of movements would allow him to evade it, but he didn't. Fear overtook him still, even when his father was no longer physically capable of doing actual harm to him. He was still frozen in fear. Crack! The glass cup shattered against the cupboard and ricocheted back towards Isaac as a piece of glass pierced his right cheek. He shielded the rest of his face before he was sure it was safe. He pulled the piece of glass from his face before turning to look at his father with hate on his face. What he saw was satisfaction, pure satisfaction. How can someone be satisfied by hurting their own child? Isaac didn't know the answer. All he felt was a tickle as the wound on his face healed, and his father became confused before worried. Isaac heard his voice but ignored him. Turning towards the back door, he made a run for it. Maybe Derek could help. His father had seen him heal. Suddenly Isaac was worried. How would Derek react? He wasn't supposed to tell anyone. Grabbing his bike, he rode off into the night. As he biked down the street, he heard the sound of a car engine coming from behind him. Pulling off into the dark, Isaac watched as the car stopped, revealing his father in the front seat. "Isaac," his father called out. Isaac sighed in relief as he pulled off again. Getting back on his bike, he wanted to head towards Derek's. That was when he heard the screams, his father's voice. Was it fear? Was he in pain? Turning his bike around, he sped in the direction of his father's voice. What he saw when he arrived wasn't something he was ready for. His father was dead. His lifeless body had been pulled from his vehicle. The front driver's car door had been pulled from its hinges. Looking around, he frowned. In the distance, he could see a shadow, but even with his enhanced vision, he was unable to see who or what it was. Looking back down at his father, he wasn't sure how he should feel. This man had terrorized him for most of his life, locked him in a freezer fridge, and beaten him black and blue when he failed to live up to his standards. Now he was dead. He didn't move when he heard the sirens. He didn't answer the questions. He just continued to stare at the body. His father's cold corpse. "You didn't see what the shadow looked like even with your wolfy vision?" The sheriff asked with a serious expression, causing the three werewolves to look at him in confusion. "Dad, we don't call it that," Stiles said, causing the sheriff to look at him like he was stupid. "Well, what do you call it, Stiles?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Enhanced vision?" Stiles didn't remember calling it anything else. Even when he first discovered the abilities, he didn't think to call it wolfy vision. "You guys," the sheriff said in disbelief. "You have superpowers and you don't name them?" "I see where I get it from," Stiles said under his breath, wondering if he ever sounded so off topic. The sound of Derek clearing his throat drew their attention back to Isaac. "I didn't see what it looked like, but I'm sure it wasn't human. It moved too fast, and the car door, what regular human could do that?" Isaac stared down at the ground as he spoke. Stiles frowned, realizing Isaac had just seen his dad die. Even if he hated the guy, there was no way he didn't see his dead body every time he closed his eyes. It was obvious he wasn't the only one to notice as Derek looked at the sheriff. "He didn't do it. Can you let him out now?" "I'll draw up the paperwork," Stiles heard his father say. Taking his attention away from Isaac, he followed his father to his office in silence. He had a lot to think about. "Do we have to go?" Allison turned to look at her mother. They were currently in her mother's minivan driving to the mall. "When was the last time you got new clothes?" her mother asked, keeping her eyes on the road. With Aunt Kate, Allison realized that she didn't actually buy a dress for the school dance she didn't go to. Scott had been banned from going that night. The only other time she had gone was with Aunt Kate during her brief visit before her disappearance. Allison was still skeptical about her leaving without saying goodbye, no matter how urgent the matter was. Allison stared out the window in silence. It was obvious that she wasn't the only one worried about Kate. "Hand me the dress, please." Allison heard her mother's voice through the door that blocked the changing room. Grabbing the dress her mother was talking about, she passed it over the door. "Sweetheart, you should find something for yourself. Maybe something to wear to dinner tonight. Your grandfather will be there." Allison sighed, wondering why his visit seemed so important to her family. Sure, she didn't even remember the last time she had seen him, but she believed that was a reason for that. Kate made sure, no matter how rough her own life was, that she would visit a few times a year. Why couldn't her grandfather do the same? Standing up, she looked around the store. Clothes and clothes hung all around the place. Jeans she had absolutely no interest in hung to her right, and the dresses were to the right, closer to the exit. Walking over, she went from dress to dress before stopping at a black one. It was a simple dress, one that seemed to fit every occasion. "Honey, do you mind running out to the car and grabbing my wallet?" Her mother's hand landed on her shoulder, causing her to jump. Turning around, she sighed when she realized it was her. "What's wrong?" her mother asked. "Nothing. You said you left your wallet in the car?" Allison raised an eyebrow, doing her best to remember the last time her mother had made such a mistake. She didn't think her mother was perfect, but she couldn't remember the last time something like this had happened. "Yep, the car should be unlocked, so just grab it out of the center console and head back in. Is this the dress you're picking?" Seeing Allison nod, she continued. Good choice, Allison smiled, hearing her mother's thoughts on her dress. I'll be back. Turning around, Allison headed out of the store. Walking back to the car, she frowned, realizing how empty the parking lot seemed. Walking over to the driver's door, she pulled the door handle, frowning when she realized it was locked. It didn't make sense. Her mother sounded so sure that it was unlocked. A small scream came from Allison's mouth before a cloth that smelled of disinfecting sprays covered her mouth. Reaching her hands up, she tried to free herself of the black gloves that covered the cloth. It was too late. The chloroform had taken effect, and Allison was unconscious. The faint sound of heels clacking could be heard as Victoria Argent appeared. She had suddenly had a feeling the door was unlocked, as she had said before. In her hands were 2 bags. She froze in horror when she realized Allison was gone. Inside a dark warehouse, Allison slowly opened her eyes, blinking to get rid of her drowsiness as she looked around the place. It was too dark to make out anything. She couldn't tell where she was. Her hands and legs were tied to a wooden chair, and she was surprised her mouth wasn't gagged. "Hello," she called, hoping to identify her captors. "Is anyone out there?" Realizing she wouldn't be getting any answers, she looked down at herself. The ropes were tied pretty tight. 1 hour later, Allison looked down at the shattered chair and loose rope. She was beginning to think that her mother had planned all of this. Forgetting her wallet in the car? Telling her the car was unlocked? It was all a test. Maybe they had finally decided to tell her everything. Walking through the warehouse, she quickly found the exit. Stepping outside, she looked up at the crescent moon. Beep. The sound of a horn drew her attention. Looking out, she spotted a truck, only it wasn't her mother's. Maybe her dad had decided to pick her up. It didn't matter, she was angry at both of them. Walking over to the truck, she ignored the driver, knowing her father wasn't usually driving when carrying products. Opening the back door, she frowned when she realized it wasn't her parents. "Hello, Allison," a white-haired, wrinkled old man said with a sinister smirk on his face. "You don't recognize me? I'm your grandfather, Gerard." Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out an old photo, and it was a younger Allison sitting on Gerard's lap. "Get in. We have a family dinner to get to." Argent home. The front door swung open, Allison being the first to walk through. Her mother's arms immediately wrapped around her, pulling her into a hug. Tears slowly fell through her eyes as she wondered if her parents had played a part in it. "What do you think you're doing? You had no right inducting Allison without our approval," Chris Argent yelled at his father with rage in his eyes. "I'm doing what the both of you should have done ages ago. This town is infested with werewolves, and you two have just watched on as they multiply." Kate was supposed to begin Allison's training, but with her disappearance, it never happened. Allison stepped away from her mother, looking at her grandfather. It was true, Kate really was missing. "She didn't check in with you after she left?" Chris asked, looking at his father. "No, but since you did mention the original, it makes sense. She's either dead or forever compelled to be his plaything. We need to draw him back so we can find out what happened to her. But before we do that, we need to train Allison. I hear she's friends with the original's supposed son. That connection will help us plan their deaths, for Kate." Stiles looked at the hood of his Jeep with red eyes. The smoke coming from the engine was making his eyes burn. "You're just lucky this happened before you were able to leave the house," his father said as he used his hand to fan the smoke. "I'll call a mechanic." Stiles looked at his Jeep, knowing that he and his beautiful car had been through thick and thin. Duct tape had held their lives together, and even when Elias allowed him to test drive his car, it didn't feel as shaking his head. He knew Elias' car was awesome. But his Jeep was the only car for him. "Listen to me, Stiles. You make sure you keep track of what they're fixing. Call me and I'll tell you what needs to be done." Money was tight. That was what his father was saying, and he understood. One day he hoped his father wouldn't have to worry about such things. Nodding his head, he got inside his Jeep as he waited on the tow truck to arrive. Later, Stiles watched as the mechanic ran a couple of routine tests to see what was wrong with his Jeep. To his left sat a guy he only recognized because he took pictures for the school yearbook. Stiles would think he was a creep if it wasn't his job. Apparently, he had a flat tire. Looking down at his phone, Stiles tapped the screen as he began to play games. "Have you put anything in here recently?" Stiles lifted his face from his phone, looking at the mechanic with a guilty smile. "Water." Stiles answered with a question. Now we know why it was steaming. Give me $30 and take this piece of crap with you. $30? For what? You didn't do anything. Styles said with a dry laugh. Because I made sure there was nothing else wrong with this heap of trash. Pay up. The mechanic stepped forward, doing his best to be intimidating, but Styles was no longer afraid of people like him. So she's okay? She's fine now, pay up. Reaching into his wallet, Styles handed over $30. He was just glad his Jeep was okay. Grabbing his car keys from the mechanic, he got inside and reversed out of the garage. The garage door closed in front of him. Reaching into his other pocket, he tried to grab his phone so he could call his dad, but it wasn't there. Looking at the passenger seat, he noticed it wasn't there either. His forehead wrinkled as he pulled his keys from the ignition. Getting out of the car, he headed back for the door. As he was walking through, Matt, the school photographer, was exiting. Did you forget something? Matt asked with a puzzled look. Yeah, I forgot my phone. You saw how shady that guy was. Who knows, he might try and sell it, Styles said, making his way around Matt. Yeah, that guy is a prick, Matt yelled towards Styles' back. Styles entered the garage and looked towards the place he had been sitting. His phone was still on the chair. He must have put it there on instinct when he stood up to talk to the mechanic. Picking it up, he was about to dial his dad's number when he heard what sounded like words. Anyone there? Styles yelled, looking around. Not hearing a response, he was about to leave when he heard the words again. Turning around, he walked towards the mechanic's office. That was when he saw him. The mechanic lay right in the doorway. The only thing moving was his eyes. Only they weren't looking at Styles. They were looking behind him. Letting out a low sigh, Styles turned around and came face to face with a monster almost as scary as wolfed-out Peter Hale. Green slimy scales and slitted eyes. It was like an iguana grew to the size of a human being, only it learned how to walk on two. Styles wanted to attack it, but he didn't notice the tail. Before he could react, he felt as if he had been pricked with a pin. He hadn't known what it would be like to be paralyzed, to lose all feeling. His body fell over, falling to the ground. He heard the creature growl before moving back towards the mechanic. With the way Styles had fallen, he could see everything that was happening. The mechanic body was dragged to where Styles' car once sat. The car garage lift was something that could lift up to 8,000 pounds. The green-scaled lizard pressed one button, and Styles was forced to watch as the mechanic screamed for help. He didn't know exactly how long the paralysis was supposed to last, but it didn't matter. He had to fight it, or he would be next. He needed to send a message. All he needed to do was move one thing. If he could move his hand, he could call someone. Elias wouldn't do it because he was still out of town, which left Derek. He only hoped his newfound alpha status would mean he stood a better chance against the Kanama than Styles did. Texting Lydia had obviously come in handy, as Styles used his newfound texting abilities to send Derek an SOS without looking at his phone once. Unfortunately, or rather fortunately for Styles, the Kanama seemed to notice his movement and hissed in his face before leaving. 2 hours later, Styles had regained all movement within his body. He had made sure it was safe to move before actually doing so. He was beginning to think that Kanama wasn't a mindless beast. If it was, he would surely be dead. Styles, what the heck does that mechanic sis mean? Derek froze as he walked through the front door. Pulling out his phone, Styles frowned, seeing that he hadn't actually sent an SOS to Derek. Doesn't matter, it was here, Derek. What was here? Derek asked, raising an eyebrow. I think it would be better if I showed you, Styles said, pointing to a camera in the very top corner of the room. It was smart. No matter how monstrous it looked, it was thinking at every turn. Look at the way he died. Styles looked over at the mechanic. The guy was a prick, but that didn't mean he should die. I don't get it, Derek said, looking over at the body. Think about your Uncle Peter, all the people he killed, the bus driver, the gas station clerk. Every kill was brutal, like an animal attack. Yeah, that's smart, but honestly, what kind of animal kills inside a gas station? That thing could have done the same, but instead, it used the car lift, making it seem like an accident. If Isaac hadn't been so close by when his father died, do you think the police would have known it was murder? Judging by the state of the vehicle, it could have been an accident. What are you saying, Styles? You think this thing is smart and methodical like a serial killer? Derek asked with a frown on his face. Yes, and judging by the fact that I'm still alive, it has targets. We need to find out what this mechanic and Isaac's father have in common. Styles. Sheriff Noah Stalinsky walked through the front door with 2 deputies behind him. Spotting Derek and Styles, he let out a sigh of relief before looking at the bloodstains and brain matter spread out on the floor. What happened to that guy? The same thing that happened to Isaac's dad, Styles said, causing his father to take another look at the body. And Isaac, have any of you seen him all day? The sheriff asked, looking at Derek. Yes, he was with me when Styles texted me, so it's not him. Nodding his head at Derek's words, the sheriff turned to Styles. So you know what this guy or thing looks like, right? Yep, and if that camera works like it's supposed, we'll all know pretty soon. Walking into the mechanic's office, Styles took a seat at his computer. Both Derek and his father followed after him, taking their places behind him, looking over his shoulder as he worked his magic on the computer. Pretty soon the video footage was up. It had been around 3 when Styles had arrived at the mechanic's. Said mechanic was working on someone else's car when he arrived, so it was another couple of hours before he finally had the chance to look at Styles' Jeep. Fast-forwarding through the tape, Styles only stopped when the green thing was in full view. The paralytic goo came from his tail, but I get the feeling it was also on its claws, Styles said as he watched the lizard-looking creature make quick work on him. It took 2 hours before I regained full control of my body. Luckily, I was able to send out a message before my body was completely under the effect of the paralysis. What the hell is that thing? The sheriff asked as he looked at the computer screen. I don't know, but we're about to find out, Derek said as he narrowed his eyes. How all we have is a picture, Styles said as the sound of the printer went off. A picture of the Kanema standing at full height as it looked over Styles' body was now in Styles' hand. Inside my family vault there's a bestiary, Derek said looking at the Stalinskys. A bestiary? Styles asked in confusion. It's a book full of supernatural creatures, the sheriff answered, causing both Styles and Derek to look at him in disbelief. What, I've been doing my research. Moving on from his father, Styles looked at Derek. Wait, your family vault? Isn't that the place where yep, let's just hope his ghost doesn't haunt us, Derek said. I knew it. I knew there were ghosts, the sheriff said in excitement as he fist-pumped the air. Derek only shook his head before looking at Styles, getting a shrug in response. Well, let's go, Styles said, only for his father to raise an army to stop him. You're not going anywhere but home. Derek can get the bestiary by himself. We'll meet up with you tomorrow morning, Derek. But Dad dashed. No, but you almost died today, not to mention you've been affected by that thing's paralysis. If you weren't a werewolf, I'd take you to the hospital right now. You're going home, I have a dead mechanic to deal with. Get some rest, Styles. The sheriff spoke in a manner that left nothing up for discussion. Well, I guess I'll see you both tomorrow, Derek said, sending a nod in the sheriff's direction. Styles, he said before turning to exit the mechanic's office. In a small clearing in the forest, Allison held a black bow up to her shoulder level. She wore a purple and black combat suit. Next to her was her grandfather Gerard, only he seemed to be wearing more casual wear. He wore a simple button-up shirt and a pair of blue jeans. Allison took a deep breath as she looked down at the side of her bow. Through her sight she could see the vast amount of trees, but only one had a bullseye on it. As if everything had slowed down and her focus had reached newfound heights, she could feel the wind. She knew how to combat it. Tilting her bow arm just a tiny bit, she let loose an arrow. The arrow swished through the air before perfectly piercing the bullseye. Letting out a slight breath, Allison lowered her bow arm before turning to look at her grandfather. Again, Gerard said, causing Allison to frown. I know it's tiring putting that much focus into one task, but you have to do it until it becomes instinct. It's the only way you'll ever be able to protect yourself. Allison nodded before once again raising her bow to shoulder level. An hour later, Allison lowered her bow, expecting her grandfather to say again, but instead, he handed her a bottle of water. You did good today, Allison. Your Aunt Kate would be proud. Would she? Allison asked between drinks of water. Of course she would. She was the one always telling me what a natural you are. She may have mentioned that your skill with a bow would one day be better than hers. Honestly, I didn't believe her, but after seeing that display, I'll have to agree. Gerard chuckled, but Allison was only worried. She's not dead, Allison said through narrowed eyes. That's what we're going to find out, and you're going to help, Gerard said, causing Allison to look at him in confusion. How? Your boyfriend Scott. He's friends with the Mikaelson boy. He has information. Information you're going to get out of him. You want me to use Scott for information? Allison asked. Exactly, Gerard smiled to himself as he looked at the last arrow Allison had shot. Styles looked at the double doors to Derek's apartment. He had arrived alone. His father was busy at work, and although he understood the situation, he couldn't exactly slack off as sheriff. Scott had been on a studying spree since they had defeated Peter. Scott wanted a normal life, and with Peter gone he had it. Even if that normal life included summer school and studying to keep up with his friends. Knock. Knock. The doors slid open with Derek being the one to open them. Behind him Styles spotted 3 other people. Isaac, who he had seen recently in a jail cell, and he could have sworn that the beauty of a blonde leaning against the wall to the left was Erica Reyes. Only the last time he saw her she looked sick and meek. Last was Boyd, who Styles would regularly chat to during lunch. Styles thought of him as somewhat of a gentle giant. Styles, I'd like to introduce you to my pack. You've already met Isaac. The blonde is Erica Reyes, and this is Boyd. He was right. It seemed all Erica needed to be the second best-looking girl in school was a werewolf bite. Thinking about the best-looking girl in school, his eyes glazed over. Lydia was everything he's ever wanted. Sure, they were simply friends right now, but he had a feeling things would be different soon. It's nice to see you both. I mean, Derek, we all kind of go to the same school together. I'd even count Boyd as a friend. We're not friends, Boyd said, causing Styles to frown. Buddy, we chat all the time in the cafeteria, Styles said. Yeah, when you have no one else to talk to. We're not friends, and I'm not your buddy. Boyd's eyes glowed yellow as he spoke. Okay, Styles said, feeling more uncomfortable than afraid. We can be friends. That is if you don't mind the handcuffs and whips, Erica said with a smirk. While that sounds pleasing, I'm kind of in a relationship. Pausing to think about his own words, Styles spoke again. I mean, what's the definition of a relationship? Styles said, stopping himself. Boy and girl so hopelessly in love that they only ever think about one another, Isaac said, surprising everyone. Well, at least half of that is true, Styles said, nodding to himself. We don't want to hear about your undying love for Lydia. Isaac, you come with me. Boyd and Erica, you two officially have the day off. I'm sure plenty of people want to hear about my undying love for Lydia, Styles said as Derek pushed by him. He walked over to a desk, pulling out an old dingy book that seemed as if it belonged in a museum. By Styles. Erica's breath hit Styles' cheek, causing him to shudder. If you and Lydia don't work out, call me, Erica smiled as she raised her hand to her face, mimicking a phone. As she and Boyd walked out of Derek's apartment, he turned to her. Why are you teasing him? He's ignored my existence for years. Now that he sees me, I'll make sure he never ignores me again. Even if he no longer stands a chance with me. Back inside with Styles. Styles looked down at the book as he looked at the supposed creature he had been attacked by. It's called the Kanama? He asked, looking at the picture of the creature that resembled the one that had attacked him. Yes, everything is the same. The venom it uses to paralyze its victims. This should make taking it down a lot easier. It basically says that the Kanama is a shapeshifter like a werewolf. Wait, that thing has a pack? There's more of them. Styles asked, hoping the answer was no. Because if there was a pack, that meant there was an alpha. No, instead of seeking a pack, the Kanama seeks a friend or a master. The Kanama is a weapon of vengeance used to carry out the master's will. This means that these aren't just random murders. My dad was killed for a reason, Isaac interrupted, a hint of anger in his eyes. Styles could only guess what that meant. With what he had heard about his dad, it wasn't surprising that Isaac wasn't sure how to react to such information. Wait, does that mean the master would have to be there when the murder happened? Styles asked, looking at the book for answers. Why did you see someone there that night? Derek replied. Someone was there. Styles pulled out his phone as he logged onto Facebook and searched for a name. Matt didn't have the most friends, but almost everyone knew him because he took the best photos for the school yearbook. His name is Matt. I was headed back inside the garage as he was leaving. Why were you headed back inside? Derek asked, confused. I forgot my phone, Derek. Stop getting caught up on the small stuff, Styles said, annoyed. When I walked back inside the garage, the Kanama had already paralyzed the mechanic. There's no way he didn't see it. Did he seem anxious when he was leaving, maybe even afraid? No, in fact he called the mechanic a prick before leaving, Styles replied. I know this guy, Isaac said, drawing the attention of both Styles and Derek. When I was younger he used to hang out with me and my brothers. My dad was the school swim team coach, and we would regularly be there when he was coaching the team. Now I wasn't there when it happened, but my brother Caleb said that Matt almost drowned, and my dad had to resuscitate him. You think this is why he's doing all of this? Because he almost died and now he's killing everyone who played a part in it? Styles asked, looking at Derek. Was the mechanic on the team? Derek turned to Isaac. Yeah, he was friends with my older brother Brian. They won state that year. Isaac began to bite his nails, happy his older brother no longer lived in Beacon Hills. We need to find his other targets, Styles said, causing Derek to nod. Wait, you said they won state that year? Yeah, back then my dad was cool, we had it all. That means there's a picture in the trophy case in the gym pool. We have to get there now before he strikes again. Derek, Styles, and Isaac entered the gym pool heading straight for the trophy case. My dad decided to put it there, so every time someone climbed out of the pool they would see it, Isaac said, somehow sounding proud. Styles remembered him mentioning that his dad wasn't always the bad guy. Before Styles and Derek could react, the Kanama dropped from the ceiling, swinging his arm toward Isaac, sending him flying towards the cement walls, knocking him out. Seeing the lizard-like creature again, Styles made the most appropriate choice. He took a step back, effectively hiding behind Derek. There was no way he himself could beat the Kanama. One touch of the venom and he'd be paralyzed, but Derek was an alpha. He hoped that meant something. Styles watched as Derek's eyes glowed red as a roar left his mouth. It was as if an enemy predator had invaded his territory. The Kanama responded in kind, only a hiss left its mouth as it swung its claws at Derek's head. With a quick duck, Derek sent a claw-filled uppercut towards the Kanama's head, sending it rolling back as it hissed in defiance. It landed on all fours, rolling its neck before once again hissing at Derek. This time the Kanama didn't simply charge in. It focused on Derek, looking for a flaw. Remember his own semi-tussle with the thing? Styles decided to warn Derek. Watch out for its tail, Styles yelled, gaining Derek's attention. Its tail. Looking at its tail, Derek frowned in confusion before focusing on the battle at hand. The Kanama stood at full height before charging Derek, swinging its arms wildly, forcing Derek to catch its scaly right wrist. Holding it tightly, Derek wanted to break it when its other hand swung towards his face, forcing him to grab that one as well. Derek watched on as its tail wrapped around his neck. Paralytic venom began affecting him as he felt his legs go weak. Derek. His instincts told him to run. Being paralyzed was a harrowing experience, one he hoped to never feel again. But he fought those feelings. Instead, he dashed towards the distracted Kanama, throwing a punch with all of his might. Seeing the Kanama fly into the wall, Styles quickly picked up Derek and began walking towards the only other exit in the pool gym. Don't worry, I'll call Scott. That thing can't beat the four of us. Reaching into his pocket, Styles pulled out his phone before looking back at the Kanama. His eyes went wide as he realized it was no longer there. Derek, it's not there. Just call Scott, Derek said. Styles looked down at his phone before hearing the hiss of the Kanama. Looking around, he frowned as he kept pulling Derek as he walked forward. Where is it? Styles was getting nervous. Suddenly he remembered what it felt like to be a regular person, powerless. He couldn't fight the Kanama. Not even Derek, who was an alpha, could stand up to it. Where was Elias when you needed him most? Styles, it's right there. Where? Styles asked, dropping his phone. Just ahead of him, blocking the exit, was the Kanama. Looking back at his phone, he frowned. He still needed to call Scott. He only hoped he would pick up. With Derek being paralyzed, it would take at least 2 hours for him to be moving again, and who knew how long it would take Isaac to wake up. He didn't have much of a choice. Letting go of Derek, he ignored the frown he was sure was on his face and picked up his phone. Styles. Splash. Swiping through his phone, he quickly dialed Scott. Looking at the water, he counted the seconds. This is Scott dash Scott, we're at the dash. And I can't come to the phone right now dash. Styles shut his mouth, dropping the phone and diving into the water. He had just thrown Derek into a pool while paralyzed to call their only hope. Maybe he jinxed himself, he wasn't sure. He could see the anger in Derek's eyes as he swam down towards him. Reaching for his waist, he wrapped his arm around him before swimming for the surface. They both gasped for air as they broke through the water's surface. Derek glared at Styles, who did his best to ignore his glare, opting to look at his phone instead. "Scott better be on his way." Derek heaved for air through his words. "Yes, Scott's not coming." Styles said no more. The Canema was no longer standing in front of the exit. It had inched closer and closer to the pool. Like an ape inching closer to its reflection in the mirror. "We have to get that phone," Styles said. "Not with that thing right there," Derek replied. Turning to the Canema, they watched as the Canema inched closer to the water. They held their breath as it opted to place one claw in the water first. Hiss, almost as if the water burned it, the Canema backed up before hissing in the direction of Derek and Styles. "Looks like we're safe," Styles said, laughing in victory. "For now," Derek said in annoyance. "Styles, how long does the paralysis last?" Styles thought about it for a second before replying. "It took around 2 hours, but you're an alpha, doesn't that mean everything is better for you?" "Maybe if this was Wolfsbane, but this is different." Derek took a deep breath. Styles was the only reason he was still alive. Without Styles holding him up, he would be a dead fish in water. "Derek, Isaac's waking up," Styles said, looking over at Isaac, who was slowly beginning to move. "Isaac." Derek called out. "Why are you calling his name? Do you want to alert that thing's attention to him?" Styles asked, looking at Derek in confusion. It was obvious that Isaac would be no help against the Canema. He had been knocked out before they had even noticed it before. "No, I want him to get out of here and go get help." Hearing his reply, Styles immediately began to do the same thing. "Isaac." They both called out in unison as the drowsy Isaac sat up, confused about his surroundings. "Run, Isaac, run!" Derek yelled. "Go get help," Styles said as they both watched Isaac immediately turn serious before dashing out of the building. They both sighed in relief, but suddenly Styles had a thought. Who would Isaac go to for help? His father wouldn't be of much help in this situation, not to mention he wanted him nowhere near such things. Boyd and Erica were the same as Isaac, inexperienced as werewolves. Derek, who's he gonna call? Doesn't matter as long as he got away. We just have to stay afloat for a little bit longer, and the paralysis should wear off. When it does, I'd rather not have to worry about Isaac's safety. Styles frowned internally as he heard Derek's response. Derek hadn't put up much of a fight against the Canema. They needed help. On the edge of the pool, he saw their salvation. Styles looked at his phone. It seemed so close and far away at the same time. Derek's weight was beginning to affect him. They needed to call someone before they were forced to either fight that thing or drown. "Styles, whatever it is you're thinking, stop." Derek's voice forced Styles to roll his eyes. "We need to call someone. If only Elias was back." "Elias is back. He's been back for the past 2 days, Derek said, causing Styles to almost drop him. "He's back and he tells you?" "I was going to meet him in Mystic Falls, but he decided to head back instead. Family problems or something. He didn't go into detail. He only said he needed some time for her." Styles nodded, and thanks to Derek, he had made a decision. "I'm going for it," Styles said, causing Derek to frown. "No, you're not. I'm in charge while Elias is away. I'm the alpha, you're not going for that phone, Styles." "You just said Elias was back," Styles said with a smirk. "I'm still Styles." Focusing on his phone, Styles dropped Derek before swimming towards his phone. Grabbing it, he quickly sent a text to Elias. He made sure to mention their location and SOS before dropping his phone and diving into the water to save Derek. Dragging Derek from the deep end, Styles smiled in satisfaction as he held up the exhausted Derek. "I swear to God, Styles, don't worry, I got him." Buzz. Elias looked down at his phone, a bit of annoyance appearing on his forehead. To his right, Bonnie continued looking at the TV. She had a comforter wrapped around her as she every so often reached down to reach into the bowl of popcorn to her left. They were currently watching a movie called Beastly, and he could immediately tell why Bonnie had chosen it. A teenage love story. It was definitely the kind of movie she would have chosen if her life hadn't suddenly upped and changed a year and a half ago. Picking up his phone, he looked at his notification, seeing it was a message from Styles. He hadn't told him he was back in town yet, so he figured it couldn't be too important. Looking back at the TV, he frowned. This really wasn't his kind of movie. Looking back at his phone, he quickly picked it up, reading the message. SOS Gym Pool. A simple message, but it was all Elias needed to escape from this movie. "I'll be back," Elias said, causing Bonnie to look his way. "But the movie's just getting good. Should I pause it?" Elias almost groaned at the thought. Having to sit through the rest of this movie would end him. "Nah, I'll be back before you know it." Standing from the couch, he walked out of the house, not even looking back. Vamp speeding away, he quickly headed into town. Gym pool. Walking into the gym pool, Elias found Styles and Derek floating in the deep end. Only both of them seemed to be on their last leg. Their heads were barely above water, and Styles was constantly spitting water out of his mouth. "Am I interrupting something here?" Elias asked as he drew their attention. "I told you I got to him," Styles said, looking at Derek. "Your texting skills haven't exactly been proven, especially not after you drowned me just to send off a text." What if he had been asleep or away from his phone? Derek asked, annoyed. "Guys," Elias called out, "are you going to stay in the water and bicker, or did you actually call me here for a reason?" "Grab my phone," Styles said, pointing his head in the direction of his phone. Sighing, Elias picked up the wet phone before waving it at Styles. "Now what?" "Unlock it. The passcode is 0519, Styles said with a smile on his face. "Lydia's birthday?" Elias asked, surprising Styles. "The greatest day in history, how'd you know?" "Marin might come back for it. Now what?" Elias said, bringing their attention back to the phone. "Go to my gallery, it should be the first picture." Doing as Styles said, Elias frowned upon seeing it. Who didn't have some kind of fear of snakes? Only snakes in the wild never intentionally target human beings. They only do what they have to do to survive. But this thing was some kind of human shapeshifter. That thing has been killing people in Beacon Hills. It uses its venom to paralyze its victims. Hence, the reason I'm currently holding Derek up." Styles said, sending Derek a look of disappointment. "I was under the impression that being an alpha meant something, but Derek went down just as easily as I did." "Yeah, well, how was I supposed to know that its tail also held venom?" Derek asked with a deadpan expression. "I kind of warned you," Styles replied. Shaking his head, Elias walked over to the edge of the pool. He wasn't afraid. He could already tell that the Kanama was long gone. "Well, luckily for you guys it's gone. The only question is, why didn't it attack you in the water?" Dragging Derek, along with him, Styles swam towards the edge of the pool. "It tried to. It was almost like the water burned it," Derek said, looking up at Elias. Nodding his head, Elias reached down, gripping both Styles and Derek by their shirts before pulling them out of the water. "Well, good luck with the lizard thing. I have a self-sacrificing sister to deal with." Elias waved behind him as he walked towards the exit. "Derek's still in charge," Elias said, causing Styles to freeze. Outside, Isaac stood alongside Erica and Boyd as they thought over their options. "Should we go in?" Erica asked with a frown on her face. "We don't stand a chance. If Derek was taken out, what do you think that thing will do to us?" Boyd asked. "We can't just leave him, he's our alpha," Isaac said while biting his nails. The gym doors opened and Elias walked out, surprising the three betas. He didn't hear their conversation, and he wasn't interested. Ignoring the looks of confusion they gave him, he kept walking until they rushed past him and into the gym. With one final look back, he vanished. Inside, Styles stood up from the ground. His clothes soaked as water continued to drip off of him. "Well, I'm going home. We'll meet up at Elias tomorrow." "Styles, you can't leave me." Derek reached out his hand, unaware that the paralysis was beginning to fade. "Judging by your hand, I think you'll be fine," Styles said, causing Derek to look down at his hand. Styles walked out of the gym, surprised to see Isaac, but not stopping to chat. Isaac rushed in, followed by Boyd and Erica. He sighed in relief when he saw Derek leaning against the wall. "I'm back," Isaac called out. Derek was surprised to see him, considering that he didn't think he would actually return. "Great, but the Kanama's already gone," Derek replied as he tightened his fist. The feeling in his body was finally returning, which meant the paralysis was wearing off. "Who was that guy that just left?" Isaac asked, and Derek could see he wasn't the only one that was interested. That was the leader of my pack. Derek didn't know how else to explain it. Was Elias truly an alpha? No, he was something better than that, but he didn't know what word to use. The best way to describe him would have to be the leader. He was above Derek, who was an alpha. I thought you were the alpha? Boyd crossed his arms in confusion as he asked. I am the alpha and you three are my betas. But he's different. He's the reason I'm an alpha. Next day the Mikaelson home was quite calm. If anything, there was an eerie presence to the home. In the living room on the couch, Bonnie and Elias sat tensely with their eyes glued to the TV. Sinister music could be heard on the TV, as suddenly an ominous voice was heard. Max ammo. Both Bonnie and Elias managed to smile as they continued to focus on the game Call of Duty World at War Zombies. Elias had been surprised when, after long consideration, Bonnie had finally decided to play alongside him. What surprised him, even more, was that she was a natural at the game. Knock knock. Elias frowned hearing the sound of the door being knocked on. He was currently using every sense he had to keep him and Bonnie alive. What? Bonnie asked, not looking from the TV. Someone's at the door. Hopefully, they decide to go away. Elias returned his attention to the TV, ignoring the constant knocking at the door. It was only about a minute later that the knocking stopped and the front door was opened. Elias only shook his head when he realized who it was. He had spent plenty of days training alongside Styles. If he couldn't recognize him by the way he smelled or walked, what kind of Lycan would he be? You know, it's not that hard to get up and open the door, Styles said as he entered the room. Yeah, we're kind of in the middle of something, Elias said as his character reloaded his gun. Oh, you're playing zombies. Styles was excited for a second before he realized. Zombies are more important than opening the door for me? Who is this guy? Bonnie asked with a laugh. This is one of my closest friends and pack member, Styles. Styles, this is my sister Bonnie. Elias introduced the two without looking from the TV. Oh, your sister Bonnie, that's why I get it, Styles said, coming to a realization. He remembered Derek saying that Elias needed some time for her. He had thought that he was talking about Marin, but Bonnie made more sense. It's nice to meet you, Bonnie, Styles said, reaching out his hand. It's nice to meet you as well, Styles, grab that. Bonnie ignored Styles' hand as the ominous voice returned. INSTA kill. Zombies died left and right as Styles lowered his hand and watched the TV. You guys are on level 50? Yep, Elias replied as his character began to board up windows. We're going for level 100, can't wait to kick Hitler's ass. Bonnie laughed as her character used the ray gun to slay zombies. Hitler's at level 100. Styles took a seat in a chair, obviously intrigued. The game went on for another couple of minutes before both Bonnie and Elias died. Seeing the game over screen, Elias frowned. Hitler's not in this game. He wasn't just saying that because he was angry that they had died. You didn't make it to level 100, so how do you know? Styles asked. That's precisely why, Styles. If I can't make it there with all of my enhanced senses, then how would a regular person? I'm practically cheating, and the best I could do was level 52. Turning to Styles, Elias changed the subject. Why exactly are you here, Styles? He asked, raising an eyebrow. We need your help. I know you said Derek was still in charge, but even he doesn't stand a chance against this thing. I don't know, Styles. Right now we're supposed to be on vacation. Going up against a human-sized lizard isn't exactly relaxing. Of course, Elias was interested, but he wanted Bonnie to relax. Her life had been full of stress since he left Mystic Falls. Sure, his life hadn't been easier, but he had never been worried about dying. Bonnie had taken it one step further and convinced herself that it would be okay as long as her friends lived. He couldn't live with that. He wasn't sure how Elena and Caroline would be able to either. Did you just say human-sized lizard? Bonnie asked, interrupting the conversation. Yes, he did, Styles said, quickly pulling out his phone and showing Bonnie the picture of the kanama. It's called a kanama. Wow, I've dealt with werewolves, vampires, and crazy witches, but I've never seen anything like this. What did it do? Bonnie asked, clearly interested. It's already killed 2 people. I'm pretty sure Derek and I would be dead if it wasn't afraid of water. Not to mention Elias did scare it off last night. Styles said, causing Bonnie to look at her brother. We're not getting involved. Sure, she was older, but right now he was in charge. He couldn't trust Bonnie with her own decisions when they always led to her trying to kill herself. Come on, baby bro. This is exactly what I need to relax. Compared to your uncle, this thing is a walk in the park. We're gonna be like Scooby-Doo and the gang only. I'm obviously Velma, which makes you Scoobs. Bonnie laughed at her own joke, ignoring Elias' deadpan look. More like Scrappy on steroids, Styles said, causing Bonnie to laugh even louder. I think I'd make a very good Fred, Styles said as he stroked his chin. More like Shaggy, Elias said as he began to walk towards the door. It had been a minute since he had a good laugh. He had forgotten how relaxing it was to be around his friends and family. That didn't include the rest of his family, as being around them tended to bring the worst out in him. I guess we're going after a lizard, Elias said as he opened the front door. Bonnie and Styles both cheered before following him outside. So what's the plan? Elias asked as Styles caught up to him. I thought you had a plan? Making such a dramatic exit, and you don't even have a plan. Styles shook his head in disappointment. I'm not exactly caught up on all the information about this thing. You, on the other hand, have been investigating. You know more about it. You make the plan. Elias only knew a couple of things. 1, it was either afraid or weak to water. 2, it was able to beat Derek even though he was an alpha. A new alpha, but an alpha nonetheless. 3, it released a paralytic venom that is implied paralyzes its victims upon contact with their skin. Styles, on the other hand, had come face to face with a thing he no doubt knew more, and had already formed a plan in his head. I'll catch you both up on the way, Styles said as he started up the engine of his Jeep. Allison leaned against her mother's car as she looked down at her phone with a bit of worry on her face. She had texted Scott to meet her, but he hadn't arrived yet. Allison, Scott's voice drew her attention as she looked up with a smile on her face. Walking forward, she walked into his arms. As they began to kiss passionately, she remembered the feeling. How it was before Peter Hale had bitten Lydia. Although all of that was over, they were still on high alert. It was hard to relax when you didn't know when the next horrible thing would happen. I've missed this, Allison said as the kiss ended. Me too, Scott responded. Well done, Allison. Allison froze when she heard his voice. Looking past Scott, she saw him, Gerard. You must be Scott McCall? Gerard asked with a knowing look. Yeah, who are you? Scott was even more confused than Allison. I'm her grandfather, and you, my boy, have walked right into my trap. Gerard reached behind his back, pulling out a handgun. No, you asked me to use him for information. Why are you doing this? Allison stepped out in front of Scott as she yelled at Gerard. There are other ways to get information, my dear. Gerard smiled as he heard the sound of a weapon going off. Turning around, Allison saw the tranq dart sticking from Scott's neck. Turning to look behind him, she frowned. Mom, what are you doing? What it takes to protect this family. We can't have another one of us end up like Kate. Thump, Scott. Allison kneeled on the grass as she looked at Scott's unconscious body. Wait, so we believe that Matt is the friend or master of the Kanama, right? Bonnie asked from the back seat as she leaned into the front side of the car looking at Styles. Yes, only we don't know who the Kanama is, Styles said, keeping his eyes on the road. But doesn't the book say the Kanama is a shapeshifter? Isn't that what you guys are? How did you guys become werewolves? The bite, Elias and Styles found themselves saying at the same time. If the Kanama is the product of the bite of an alpha, that means it can only be two people, Jackson and Lydia, Styles said, interrupting Elias. Derek looked out the window of his loft. He had dived back into the bestiary and realized the origins of the Kanama. What are we gonna do? Isaac asked, looking to his alpha. Off to the side stood Erica with a smirk on her face. Ever since the bite, she had become more confident. Sometimes even to a fault. Isn't it obvious that one of them is the Kanama, which means one of them needs to die? Boyd stood off to the side. He was glad to be a part of something, rather than the invisible bystander. He frowned while looking at Erica. Sure, he understood what becoming a werewolf meant, but wasn't it too soon for Erica to be talking about killing someone? We don't know which one it is, Isaac said once again, turning his attention to Derek looking for his response. Erica's right, one of them is the Kanama. But so are you, Isaac. Turning around, Derek looked at his betas. We need to test them, but we don't know enough about the Kanama to be jumping to conclusions. We aren't jumping to conclusions, they were bitten. I say we grab them both and watch to see who changes. They won't change in front of us, Boyd said with a deadpan look. Then we make them change, Erica said as she flicked her wrist showing her claws. The grin on her face showed how sadistic she was. Derek took a second to think about it before finally nodding. It was a risk, but there were ways to stop the transformation before it happened. He didn't know much about the Kanama, but it was a shapeshifter. That was something he knew plenty about. Styles pulled the Jeep to a stop just outside Lydia's house. Hopping out of the Jeep, he ran to the front door knocking. Soon Lydia's mother opened the door with a smile on her face. I was wondering when you would stop by again, Styles. Hi, Mrs. Martin, I was wondering, is Lydia home? No, in fact, she left with a few friends a few minutes ago. I don't know about those kids. I didn't think they were Lydia's type of crowd. Sorry, Mrs. Martin, I have to go. Styles turned to look at the car before he came to a realization. Turning back around, he spoke. You said they didn't look like Lydia's type of crowd? What exactly did they look like? Oh, you should have seen them. One of them just looked so broody, tall, dark, and handsome, with obvious emotional baggage. I truly hope Lydia doesn't end up liking him. I think you're a much better choice, Styles. You do? Styles asked, surprised as a smile appeared on her face. Of course I do. You may not be as handsome as he was, but I'm sure in a year or two you'll grow into your own. Not to mention we both know how smart Lydia truly is. I fear she'll end up with some two-bit thug with half a brain. Styles' smile dropped from his face, not knowing how to take the backward compliment before shaking his head. What did the rest of them look like? There was another broody one that stood in the back. African American, looked like he could play football. But here in Beacon Hills, I guess he could only play lacrosse. Then there was another one, he seemed nervous. Oh, and there was a cute blonde with a leather jacket. Derek, Styles said under his breath as a frown appeared on his face. What's wrong, Styles? Is Lydia in trouble or something? Mrs. Martin asked, seeing his expression. No, Mrs. Martin. Derek's a friend. Thanks for your help. Turning around, Styles jogged back to his Jeep. Bye, Styles. Mrs. Martin watched from the door with a look of pity. If only he wasn't so quirky. What did she say? Bonnie asked, leaning in from the back seat as Styles entered the Jeep. She's gone, Styles said as he started up the Jeep. It seems we weren't the only ones who figured out that the Kanama is a failed shapeshifter. Elias commented from the passenger seat. He could practically hear the thoughts coming from Styles' head. Derek has her. Styles tightened the grip on the steering wheel as every possible thought filtered through his head. He was worried, and rightfully so. Derek had killed his own uncle. Killing Lydia would be a cakewalk. Isn't Derek a part of your pack, Elias? Bonnie asked with a frown on her face. Yeah, only I told him he was in charge. Right now he's doing what he thinks is right. The good thing is finding Derek shouldn't be too difficult. Do you think he'd take the Kanama to his own home? Elias asked, turning to Styles immediately, seeing realization strike his face. Not the loft, but his old home, definitely. Old Hale House. The charred remains of the building still remained. Derek had done his best to make the place inhabitable. He had lived here for a short time after returning to Beacon Hills. Tied up against the wall rested two teenagers, one with strawberry blonde hair. The other only glared at Derek and his pack-mate. Tied up against the wall rested two teenagers. Lydia and Jackson were a few feet apart. Both were currently tied up and gagged, so they wouldn't be able to talk. Fear could be seen in Lydia's eyes while Jackson simply glared at his captors, no doubt wishing he could speak. Derek was glad he had decided to gag Jackson. Hearing his snarky voice would have no doubt annoyed him to no end. Erica paced back and forth with a smile on her face as she looked at Jackson and Lydia. Lydia hadn't bullied her once, but the look of pity she would give her every so often was seared in her mind, causing rage. She hated how weak and pitiful she had been throughout her whole life. She liked the way Lydia currently looked at her. First, it was confusion, then realization, and finally fear. The last had surely been because she bared her claws at her, even threatening to disfigure her beautiful face. Had it not been for Derek's insistence, she surely would have already done so. Jackson, on the other hand, was a nuisance to all of them. She was sure even Derek himself hated the prick. But still, he relented, making sure she didn't harm them. I don't see why it matters which one is the Kanama. We can just kill them both, Erica said with a sadistic smile on her face. We don't kill the innocent, Derek said as he crossed his arms and leaned against the wall. He still wasn't exactly sure how to differentiate between the two. Both had been turned the same night, and yet neither of them smelled like a werewolf. Then we just need them to shift, Isaac said. He and Boyd watched from the side as Erica and Derek talked. Stiles stopped the jeep and immediately took off towards the old Hale house, leaving behind Elias and Bonnie. He's driven, Bonnie commented as she stepped out of the jeep. He's been in love with Lydia since the 3rd grade. His love for her blinds him, but that's okay. I don't want friends that are incapable of giving their all for someone they love. I don't want friends like my father and uncle. You saw them. They betray each other on a whim. They only love themselves. Elias shook his head as he and Bonnie began walking towards the old Hale house. That's not true. They very much love you, Elias. I've seen what they're both capable of, but when you arrived they were both worried. Worried that your opinion of them would change for the worse. They care in their own sick ways. Elias only smiled, not because of his father and uncle but because of Bonnie. She was trying to cheer him up, defending the very people she hates. Stiles barged through the charred remains of the old Hale house. He could already hear the heartbeats of everyone in the place. 6 heartbeats. It seemed that Derek had picked up Jackson along the way. It made sense. He was the only other person that could be the Kanama. Lydia. Stiles called out upon entering the room. Lydia rested against the black wall covered in soot. Next to her was Jackson. His and Lydia's eyes seemed to meet as he entered. First there was happiness. Derek hadn't done something stupid and killed them both, and then there was anger. What right did Derek have to tie her up like this? Turning to Derek, he looked him straight in the eyes as his eyes glowed gold. Derek. An unnatural deepness appeared in Stiles's voice as he began walking towards Derek. Stiles, you need to calm down, Derek said, showing no signs of anxiousness as Stiles walked his way. You crossed the line, Stiles pointed at Derek as he began to pick up speed. Before he could get any closer, his path was blocked. Get out of my way, Boyd, this is between your alpha and me. You think you can just waltz in here and do whatever you want? You want to get to them, then you're gonna have to go through me. Stiles only sighed as he continued walking forward. Boyd threw a punch and he quickly raised his arms up to block it. He slid across the floor, coming to a stop. Dropping his arms, he ignored the numbness he was feeling. You don't stand a chance, Stiles, Boyd said as his eyes glowed. Stiles didn't react. He didn't need to. Boyd was like him when he first became a werewolf, only instead of being a natural, he had an unnatural amount of strength. But it didn't matter to Stiles this time. As he walked forward, he slowly picked up speed. Boyd seemed annoyed at his arrogance. He made the decision to put Stiles down on his ass. Even Derek had commended his strength, and while he couldn't match an alpha, he could surely match another beta. But things didn't go as Boyd expected. As he and Stiles collided, he was the one forced on his ass. Derek raised an eyebrow upon seeing that. Something was different about Stiles. Was it his anger? Derek shook his head, noting that no matter how angry Stiles was, he shouldn't have been able to match Boyd's strength. Before Derek could step forward, someone else had. Erica stood out in front of them with a smirk on her face. Hello, Stiles. Stiles paused upon seeing her. You should get out of the way, Erica, unless you want to end up like Boyd. You wouldn't want to hurt me, Stiles, would you? Erica asked with a pout. Stiles shook his head, seeing her pout. He suddenly remembered how she was before. Looking away from her, he locked eyes with Derek, anger returning to his eyes. Only his anger wasn't only for Lydia. Erica hadn't had the perfect life before all of this, but now she was becoming a part of something more dangerous than she knew. He didn't think she could handle it. You've already ruined one girl's life. How about you give me Lydia before you make another mistake? Erica frowned upon seeing the look Stiles had given her. It reminded her of who she was before. He pitied her then, and for some reason, he pitied her now. She didn't get it. Why couldn't she get the reaction she wanted out of him? Looking past Derek, it hit her. Lydia. You've always been so nice, Stiles. Even when I'd have seizures and come to laying in my own piss. You didn't take pictures and laugh at me like everyone else. A sad smile appeared on Erica's face as he thought about that. But you never really understood me. It was only pity. and even that went out the window when it came to her. She stopped next to Lydia, kneeling down to her side. I've had a crush on you since the 3rd grade, Styles. Remind you of anything? Erica. Styles frowned as the realization hit him. I'm tired of being second fiddle to this bitch. Flicking her wrist, Erica raised her claws to Lydia's neck. Maybe you'll give me something other than pity now. Erica glared as a smile appeared on her face. Erica, stand down, Derek said with a bit of authority in his voice. Erica let out a huff before her claws were removed from Lydia's neck. As she began walking toward Derek, Styles began to walk towards Lydia. Suddenly his vision was blocked by the broad-shouldered Derek. I can't let you do that, Styles. Derek looked down at his friend with a stern look on his face. What right do you have to drag her here against her will? Styles' voice was filled with so much anger that he felt as if he was drowning in it. Styles, she could be the Kanama. I couldn't risk her killing more people. Derek knew he was right. There weren't many people that they knew that had recently received the bite. Ignoring his own pack, who he had watched over closely, Lydia and Jackson were the only other choices. It's not her, Styles said, looking past Derek with a complicated look on his face. How do you know that? Derek asked, knowing that Styles couldn't answer that question. It was obvious that Styles had feelings for Lydia, and Derek believed those feelings were clouding his judgment. I just know, now get out of my way. Styles' eyes flashed golden as he stared down Derek. I don't want to do this, Styles, Derek said as his eyes flashed red. Behind him, Erica Boyd's and Isaac's eyes all flashed gold. Then don't, Styles said with no fear in his voice. I think that's enough. Appearing out of nowhere, Elias places a hand on both of their shoulders. A bit of a smile could be seen on his face. Elias, Derek said with a bit of surprise in his voice. I thought you weren't being involved, Derek said with a frown on his face. Well, let's just say Styles makes a compelling argument. Not to mention it was this or Mean Girls, and Derek, I'd much rather be doing this. I heard that. Bonnie entered the room frowning at her little brother. As if the Spider-Man trilogy is any better. Hey, those movies are classics. Hopefully, the new guy does just as well as Toby. Elias said, knowing that a new Spider-Man movie was coming out soon. Honestly, although he aged rapidly, sometimes he still felt like his old self. Or maybe people just never outgrew movies like Spider-Man. Turning his attention back to Styles and Derek, there was a bit of surprise in his eyes. Derek was an alpha. Sure, he had only become one recently, but Elias could feel the change. Especially those glowing red eyes. Remembering his uncle's words, he nodded. They did look pretty cool. Styles, on the other hand, didn't feel the same as he had before Elias had left. Was it the current anger he felt over Derek holding Lydia hostage, or was something else going on? Deaton hadn't mentioned anything about this when he told Elias of his Lycan heritage. Obviously, Styles was different from regular betas considering how fast he had taken to the bite, but how different was he? Elias hadn't been here to see the clash between Styles and Boyd, but he could hear, and it was obvious that Styles had won that ideal. Had his anger made him physically stronger? Shaking his head, he realized he could look more into that later. Taking Lydia hostage was a tad bit far, but this does make things easier, Elias said, patting Derek on the shoulder. Elias, Styles said, but was immediately interrupted. Styles, I know what you're going to say, but there is a chance that Lydia is the Kanama. Don't worry, even if she is, we'll figure it out. Elias nodded in reassurance before looking towards the tied-up Lydia and Jackson. The only question is, how do we figure out who the Kanama is? I may be able to help, Bonnie waved her hand as she stepped forwards. She frowned as she stopped next to Elias. She commented before making her way over to Lydia. What does that mean? Styles asked, turning to Elias. Elias simply shrugged his shoulders before frowning himself. Bonnie, don't get too close. Yeah, I'll be fine. I fought off your uncle and father. I think I can take care of a few shapeshifters. Bonnie's words shocked everyone except for Elias. Kneeling down in front of Lydia, she grabbed her hand as she shut her eyes. You're different, Bonnie said as she locked eyes with the fearful Lydia. The bite, it didn't work on you. You're a witch. What do you mean she's a witch? Styles asked, turning his attention to Bonnie. Elias, who stood not too far away, nodded as he thought about what Bonnie just said. Lydia's scream. He was sure every supernatural in the city must have heard her scream. It was full of power. It makes sense, Elias said, causing Styles to look at him in confusion. Her scream. Do you remember what you felt when you heard it? Elias asked as he looked at Styles. What does her being a witch have anything to do with this? Derek asked, taking a step forward. Well, for starters, it means the bite is magical in nature. Lydia, have you ever shown any signs of using magic in the past? Have you seen things when touching certain items? Have you seen signs? Seeing Lydia shake her head, Bonnie continued. It seems that the bite allowed her powers to awaken. I don't know what kind of witch she is, but if that scream you all heard is what I think it is, she can't be this Kanama thing. Untie her, Elias spoke, shocking Derek. We don't know if it's her yet, even though she doesn't know for sure, Derek said, looking at Bonnie. It's fine. Lydia's gonna stay with us for the next couple of days. That way we can keep an eye on her and Styles. As you already know, you're welcome at any time. Elias turned his attention from Lydia instead, looking at Jackson. He was already pretty sure that Lydia wasn't the Kanama, which only left Jackson. Unfortunately, that only leaves Jackson, Bonnie. How do you think the Master controls the Kanama? Elias asked a question he had been thinking about for quite a while. All of a sudden, having control over something like the Kanama wasn't something natural. You're thinking it could be similar to a ritual. You think they're connected through magic. Bonnie smiled a bit as she thought about it. My mom told me that my body is full of magic. Wouldn't it be the same for the Kanama and even Styles and Derek? Bonnie took a few seconds to think before nodding. The chances are small, but if they're linked, I might be able to use that connection to track down the master of the Kanama. Only it would have to be the Kanama I cast the magic on. Green scaly skin and reptile eyes. Elias nodded, realizing they would still have to be patient. If Jackson or Lydia were the Kanama, they weren't aware of it. The Kanama was more or less a puppet to be used by the master. It was a sad form of existence, but for someone like Jackson, Elias wasn't too sure that he minded. The guy was a jerk. Finding out you've been brainwashed for most of your life sucks. Finding out it was your father that brainwashed you hurt deeply. For Kate, what came after was anger. She had become the very thing she hunted, and now she could see things through a different lens. What does one do when they become the very thing they once hated? Well, it took Kate a while to come to terms with who she now was. It was only then that she realized that her hate and disgust for werewolves was something she had inherited from her father. All her drive and passion had come from her ultimately wanting her father's love and attention. She cringed at the thought now, because she knew her fate. She knew what her father would do upon discovering what she was now. Right now none of that mattered though, because she hadn't returned to kill her father. Not yet. No, she had returned to save the only person that mattered to her. Allison. They say you should learn history, or you're destined to repeat it. Allison was currently repeating the very same path Kate had once walked. Derek Hale. Thinking about that name, a small smile appeared on Kate's face. Yes, he no doubt currently hated her guts, but they once had something. Something Kate had ruined to get into her father's good graces. With Kate all of a sudden going missing, she was sure her family had begun to consider her dead. Using her connections, Kate had easily discovered that her father had traveled to Beacon Hills. Allison would be his target. Kate wasn't afraid to admit it. Allison had more natural talent than she herself had ever had. A natural-born hunter with a penchant for falling for werewolves. Kate chuckled as she thought about that. Kate had been watching Allison closely these last few days. It seemed that her father had already gotten into her head. She had been tricked into placing Scott up on the chopping board. Kate had to save him. She wouldn't allow Allison to have the same fate as herself. Getting Scott out was only the beginning though. Her father hadn't returned to Beacon Hills because Kate had gone missing. He had other plans. Plans Kate didn't mind putting an end to herself. Scott McCall opened his, feeling the stinging pain that filled his face. Even with his healing, he could still feel the effects of Gerard's last torture session. He was in a dark room. The walls were metal. With his hearing alone, he could tell they were underground. He was currently chained against the metal wall. His blood stained the floor. His hair was matted to his forehead. His clothes drenched with blood and sweat. Being the target of a shock baton wasn't very pleasing. Scott wheezed just at the thought. He didn't know how he was holding on. Gerard had kidnapped him for information, only he hadn't asked him one question. Scott wondered why Allison had allowed this to happen. Did she know what was happening to him? Hearing the sound of the metal doors opening, Scott wondered what kind of torture he would go through today. Only the footsteps were different this time. Gerard's were usually full of confidence and vigor. These footsteps were cautious and subtle, almost as if the person was sneaking inside. Hope began to rise inside of Scott. Had Allison finally found out what happened to him, or even better? Had Styles discovered his location? Looking at the passage into the room, he waited anxiously, but upon seeing her face he felt fear. "Kate," he whispered with a frown on his face. Kate had burned the entire Hale pack alive. What would she do to him? "You don't have to look at me with those eyes. I'm not allowed to harm your alpha, which unfortunately means I can't harm you." Kate sighed as she stepped closer to Scott. "Let me guess, you had a date scheduled with Allison, and now you're here chained against the wall by her family?" Kate grinned as she looked down at Scott. "Allison would never dash, I know, but right now she doesn't have much of a choice. That's why I'm here to stop her from becoming a pawn, like me." Even now Kate was a pawn, and Klaus was a king with all of the abilities of the queen. This was a game she couldn't play. She didn't even know the rules. The Argents had hunted werewolves for hundreds of years, and yet they never branched out to vampires. There had to be a reason for that. If there was one, it was simple. The originals. "I should probably get you out of here." Kate took another step forward, but stopped upon hearing the metal door opening. "Kate." Victoria Argent ran over to Kate's side, grabbing her hand. "We thought the worst. Allison hasn't been herself since you disappeared." Kate could see the worry on Victoria's face, but it may as well have been fake. If she knew what she was, she'd stab her to death right here and now. "Where is Allison?" Kate asked. "She's with Gerard. I'll take you to them, but before that." Looking at Scott, Victoria's expression changed. Disgust and anger could be seen on her face. "You thought you could date my daughter. You're a monster." Walking over to Scott, she reached for the electric baton. His screams drowned out the sound of her laughter. Mikaelson manner confusion. They could all see it in Jackson's eyes. It overwhelmed whatever fear he felt within. He didn't seem to realize what he was, even as he suddenly began to tear at his own skin. Oily green scales could be found beneath the surface. A true monster appeared, and no one made a sound. That was until he began to step forward, reaching his hand out before rebounding off the invisible barrier Bonnie had created minutes before. A resounding screech filled the room next, causing no one but Styles to jump. Elias managed to stop himself from sighing while looking at Styles. It seemed some things simply wouldn't change. "Bonnie, I'm guessing you can do the tracking spell now?" Elias asked, taking a step towards the kanama. Bonnie nodded, stepping forwards and beginning to chant the spell as she closed her eyes. "What are we gonna do about him?" Styles untied the rope bounding Lydia, helping her up from the ground. He made sure to send a couple of glares toward Derek and his pack while he did so. "I say we kill him." Derek shrugged his shoulders as he spoke. "We can't kill Jackson," Styles argued. "Why not? He caused all of this. He traded Lydia for the bite, and because of his nature, he turned into that thing. He's killed multiple people already. Who's to say he won't kill more? We can't kill him. He's a jerk and a liar. But deep down he's just afraid. Everything he's done is because he's afraid. Afraid he isn't enough for his parents. Afraid that he won't be cool if everyone knows he's gay. He wasn't like this at first. He just needs help." Lydia spoke up, causing everyone to fall silent. "You're defending the person that sold you to my uncle like cattle?" Derek asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm perfectly fine. I'm alive. Why should I hold a grudge when I know he didn't really mean me any harm?" "Found him, he's here." Bonnie pointed at a map of Beacon Hills, pointing directly at the school. Not directly at it, just to the right of it where the pool facility was located. "Why is he there?" Styles asked, confused. "Who knows, but he's caused enough mayhem in Beacon Hills. Let's get rid of him, and hopefully when school starts back things are more peaceful." Elias walked towards one of the chairs, picking up his jacket. "Bonnie, you should stay here and look after him." Bonnie nodded, looking towards the kanama. Lydia Styles was stopped as Elias' hand landed on his shoulder. "I think it's best if Lydia stays with Bonnie. I'm guessing she has plenty of questions." Elias then looked at Derek. Keep them safe while we're gone. Getting a nod, Elias walked towards the exit with Styles. I've been meaning to ask this, but has anyone seen Scott today? Stopping at the door, Elias turned around, seeing the frowns on everyone's faces. No one's seen him? What about you, Styles? He should be with Allison right now. He sent me a text saying they were meeting up. Elias nodded, hearing that. It seemed at least one person was enjoying their summer. Scott did his best to catch his breath. He didn't know when the next torture session would commence. Werewolf healing was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it made it so he quickly healed from most injuries. On the other hand, that meant reliving the very same torture over and over again. How many questions had they asked? None. They only stared at him with condescending eyes. Looking at the gate, Scott's ears perked. The pitter-patter of those footsteps reminded him of someone. The metal door swung open, revealing an old man with a friendly smile on his face. Hello, Scott. I think it's time we ask you a few questions. Gerard Argent looked down at Scott with a twinge of mirth in his eyes. Pool building Matt stood with his back to the entrance. In front of him was the trophy case for Beacon Hills High School. His eyes lingered on the picture of the swim team from 8 or 9 years ago. He somewhat had a bad feeling when the Kanema hadn't shown up. His revenge was something he thought would never happen. It was his own luck that had brought him this far. Elias and Styles entered the building. Elias raised an eyebrow upon seeing Matt standing with his back facing them. So this is how it ends, Matt spoke before turning around with a smile on his face. Matt, you really did all of this? Styles was surprised to see Matt standing on the other side of the pool. To think that the guy who took pictures for the school yearbook could murder so easily. I only gave them what they deserved, each one of them. It's unfortunate that I won't be able to finish things, now that you're both here. So you know about us, Elias commented as a small smile appeared on his face. Not so much you, but everyone else. The pictures don't lie, none of them are human, and since they follow your orders like dogs, that can only mean you're even worse than they are. Matt spoke with a hint of disgust in his voice. The only one here lacking humanity is you. You killed innocent people, and for what revenge? Elias scoffed at the thought. They weren't innocent, they murdered me right here, and Isaac's father covered it all up. Matt tightened his fist, throwing them to his side as he took a step forwards. You hear that, Styles? It seems we're talking to a ghost. You say they murdered you, and yet I hear your heartbeat. I'm confused. And what about the others? How many times did you almost kill Styles? You're using Jackson for your revenge, and he has no idea. Do they also deserve this? Styles just kept getting in my way. I didn't want to harm him, but eventually he became a nuisance. And Jackson, he's not innocent. He's a bully. Last I checked, they descended into the deepest parts of hell. So as long as they don't annoy you, they're fine? Elias looked at Styles and shook his head. Doesn't seem like Styles ever stood a chance. Styles rebounded hearing those words. Hey, I can be not annoying. Looking at Elias, he pouted. It was a compliment. Annoy our enemies to the death, it'll make things easier for the rest of us. Elias grinned as he said those words. You've been different since you returned. What happened in Mystic Falls? I saw my family trying to rip each other's throats out. My uncle is just as everyone describes him, a monster. Elias dropped the grin as a solemn air overtook him. Do you really think you can just ignore me? Matt, who both Styles and Elias had forgotten about, spoke up. Styles, what do you think will happen to Jackson if he dies? Elias asked, ignoring Matt. Well, Bonnie said he's something like the puppet master. If he dies, there's no one to control Jackson. Maybe it'll cut their connection and return him to normal. Maybe it'll kill him. Which one do you prefer? I'm with Lydia on this one. Jackson doesn't deserve to die. He's already lost everything anyway. Elias nodded hearing that before turning to Matt. I guess we're taking a chance here. Unfortunately, that means you'll have to come with us. I'll let Bonnie run a couple of tests. Maybe then we'll know for sure. You idiots truly understand nothing. I'll complete my revenge myself. I might as well add you two to the list. As Matt spoke, two green lizard-like wings furled from his back. Next, his skin began to break apart, revealing the scaly skin beneath. That's new, Styles commented, taking a step behind Elias. You can handle that, right? Elias only signed before vanishing. He reappeared behind Matt. You know you could have made this a lot easier. Grabbing one of his wings, Elias used his foot as leverage before pulling with all of his might. Matt's animalistic screech filled the air. Elias dropped one wing to the floor before reaching for the next. I thought you were just a puppet master, but you're more like an alpha. Unfortunately, even alphas don't stand a chance against a Mikaelson. Removing the other wing, Elias looked down at the bloody and beaten Matt. I guess you won't be completing your revenge after all. Arrogant, Matt coughed out as his tail cut through the air, targeting Elias's nape. Elias sighed as he caught the slimy green tail. Matt's cough-filled laughter penetrated the air. Don't you feel it? The feeling of your limbs going numb. You see, my venom is vastly stronger than that of a regular canima's. There's also the fact that you won't only be paralyzed, you'll feel the venom tear your insides apart. Elias ignored Matt's laughter, looking down at his hand and tightening his fist. He couldn't say for sure if he felt anything for sure, but it didn't matter. As of now, he was completely fine. Well, before it kicks in, lifting Matt up by the neck, Elias ignored the discomfort of the slimy, scaly skin, instead squeezing with all of his might. He clawed and kicked to free himself. Desperation. Elias could see it in the scaro of his eyes. Sighing softly, he stabbed forwards with his other hand before dropping Matt's lifeless body. In his hand was a heart, Matt's still beating heart. Another one dead, Elias sighed at the thought. Turning to look at Styles, he didn't see the look of disgust he expected. Only understanding. Styles, I think you're gonna have to carry me to the car. What? Before Styles could react, Elias fell to the ground, right next to Matt's lifeless body. He was no longer the Kanima. That'd make things easier to explain in the end. Running over to Elias, he looked at his eyes, immediately understanding what was happening. He hadn't expected the Kanima venom to actually work on Elias. Mikaelson Manor. Gerard sat in a car outside of the Mikaelson Manor. He looked up at the building with a hint of fear inside. How long had he been a hunter, and how long had he fought the urge to change targets? Vampires were much worse than werewolves, and yet even he knew he and his family stood no chance. But right here and now they stood outside of the home of one of the so-called kings of vampires. He felt more excited than anything. With him there was a chance of his family doing what no one else could. He's gone. As long as you keep up your end of the deal, I'll incapacitate the witch and hand her over to you. A pale-skinned woman said. In return, you get the girl Lydia and the werewolf Derek. Peeking his head outside of the door, Gerard looked at his men. Don't kill any of them. We still want the boy to cooperate. Follow her lead. Wait, so your Grams has been telling you that you're a witch your whole life, and you simply thought she was crazy? Lydia asked wide-eyed as she looked at Bonnie. Ask Elias. Grams has always been on the eccentric side. So it was kind of hard to take her for her word. But strange things kept happening, and soon enough I had no choice but to face the truth. Lydia, you're about to go through the exact same thing I went through, and you may think you're crazy at times. I don't know how much longer I'll be in Beacon Hills, but I'll do my best to guide you while I can. Bonnie looked at Lydia, seeing herself. She was simply a girl more focused on high school popularity before the Salvatores showed up. Thank you, Bonnie. Things have already been crazy, and now finding out I'm like you. I have to ask my mom about this when I get the chance. Good idea. It probably runs in the family. I wouldn't be surprised if your mother is like us as well. Bonnie paused, looking at Derek and his pack. Bonnie frowned. You guys didn't hear that? Had we heard something, you'd be the first to know, considering we're practically your brother's slaves. Erica rolled her eyes as she rested her head in her hand. Erica. Derek sent her a glare. Maybe following Elias' orders wasn't something his pack liked. But Derek knew he wouldn't be an alpha without Elias. Beating Peter alone would have been troublesome. Fighting him alongside the Argents and Jennifer, Derek knew he would have ended up another casualty if not for Elias. Beep, beep, beep. What is that? Derek frowned as the beeping got faster and he recognized it. Everyone get dash! Boomed the front door, and the walls connected to it exploded into debris. A ringing sound filled the manor, overpowering the werewolves and leaving both Lydia and Bonnie woozy. They couldn't hear the subtle sound of a witch casting a spell. Jennifer smiled as she finished her spell. Once the smoke cleared, the room of unconscious people was revealed. "You're fast. You sure you don't want to put Peter Hale behind you and work for me?" Gerard asked with a smirk as he stepped into the house. "Peter and I are in love, and all of this is a part of his plan. I don't see myself ever leaving his side." Gerard shrugged his shoulders upon hearing that. Having a witch on his side would be nice, but as of right now he couldn't force her. "Grab the ones we need, leave the rest." Gerard waved his hand, ordering his men. "I don't get it. Why not kill the ones you don't need?" Jennifer asked. "Because I still need the Mikaelson boy to cooperate. I don't need him throwing away everything he holds dear just to kill me." Gerard's usually calm and in-control voice seemed a bit shaky as he spoke of Elias. "So it's fear?" Jennifer asked. "No one wants to die, unfortunately. I need that boy, or I would have long since begun targeting the originals. I'll have my men carry the girl and Derek Hale to a car. They'll take you wherever you need." "Pleasure doing business with you," Jennifer said before exiting the manor. Elias stepped over the destroyed part of the manor. Looking inside, he found the unconscious bodies of Derek's 3 betas. Still trapped inside the barrier, Spell Jackson leaned against the wall, unconscious as well. What happened? Styles followed him, confused by the destruction. "Lydia!" he yelled out, looking around the manor. "They're gone, Styles, Bonnie, Lydia, and Derek. They're not here." Elias clenched his teeth as he spoke. If it wasn't one thing, it was another. They had just gotten rid of Matt, and now what? Ring, ring, ring. Perking his ears up, he quickly found the ringing phone. Picking it up, he noticed it was an unknown number calling. He looked around the house before pressing an answer. "Hello. You must be Elias. I'm Gerard Argent. I'm sure you can guess as to why I'm calling." Elias could picture the smug smile on the face of the caller. "You have my sister?" Elias asked as his teeth began to elongate. "If the beautiful young brown-skinned witch is your sister, then yes, I have her, and you won't be getting her back unless you do as I ask." "What about the others?" Elias asked, still keeping his emotions in check. "What about Lydia and Derek?" "I handed them over to Peter Hale's nurse. You'll have to deal with that on your own." Jennifer, venom-laced Styles' voice as he said her name. It seemed Elias wasn't the only one on the edge of losing it. "What do you want for Bonnie?" Elias asked. "Meet me at the old railroad station, and come alone. Your sister isn't the only hostage we have." I can still hear his screams. I wonder how much longer Scott McCall will last. Elias crushed the phone in his hand as Gerard hung up. "That explains why we haven't heard from Scott all day," Elias commented, looking at Styles. "I should have known something was wrong," Styles said, no longer hiding his anger as his eyes glowed gold. "Wake them up, take them with you, and free Scott. Once we have Bonnie back, we'll do another locator spell to find Lydia and Derek." Elias didn't wait for a response. Instead, Vamp sped away. He could feel it in the back of his throat, the thirst for blood, and yet he knew he couldn't scratch that itch. Right now he needed to focus on freeing Bonnie. Old railroad station. The moon had already risen high above the sky. Its crescent shape put Elias at ease. He hadn't had time to worry about the full moon, but as of now believed that not only was he over the hump, the rest of his pack was as well. Walking the grass-covered train tracks, Elias quickly spotted Gerard Argent. To his left, tied up on the ground, was Bonnie. Her eyes were wide open and her mouth gagged. Taking a step forward, Elias immediately stopped, seeing Gerard raise his hand. "I think that'll be close enough." As he spoke, men wearing black revealed themselves, each with machine guns in hand. "I understand you're a bit different from regular werewolves, but I'm sure our wolfsbane-laced bullets will at least slow you down. If it truly comes down to that, you won't be the person we target, though." Gerard smiled as the guns that were pointing at Elias changed to Bonnie. "I get it. Now tell me what you want." "Originally, I wanted your sister to do a spell for me. That was before I met the other witch. It was through her that I learned that witches aren't that useful. They can't cure the thing that ails me." "You're dying? Is that why you're doing this?" "Yeah, I'm dying, but you see, I'd rather not. Which is why I have your sister. You're gonna turn me. In return, I'll release your sister." Elias held back his laughter as he looked at Gerard. My father once mentioned the Argents. He found you guys to be foolish in believing that you can take on the supernatural world. Well, sometimes it's the fools that truly see things as they are, Gerard commented. Yeah, but he also admired your family because of your code. Chris told him that if one of you turned, you'd end your own life, because that was better than becoming the very monster you hunt. But here you are asking me to turn you. You want the bite? Come over here, I'll give it to you. Elias couldn't care less. He only wanted Bonnie safe. I don't think you understand. I don't want the bite. No, I want your blood. Vampire it is. Elias took a bite of his wrist, allowing his blood to flow. You have a cup or something? You're smart for your age. Taking a knee, Gerard reached into a black bag, pulling out a mug. You guys keep your guns trained on the girl. If he makes any sudden moves, kill her. He then slowly made his way to Elias, placing the cup under his bleeding wrist. So what's killing you? Cancer, brain aneurysm, or is it simply old age? Elias cracked a smile as he asked. Cancer, Gerard commented, never taking his eyes off the cup. Once it was full enough, he raised it to his mouth, chugging it. I guess karma does exist. How many families have you hunted? I'm sure Derek's family isn't the only one you burned to a crisp. What's next? Gerard asked once he finished drinking the blood. He had no interest in entertaining the talk of his morality. Behind one of the trains, Kate slowly climbed a ladder. Strapped to her shoulder was a black machine gun. Once atop the train, she moved slowly towards the front of it. Looking in front of her, she locked eyes with Elias as he cracked a smile. In front of him was her father. It was the first time since her eyes had been opened that she saw him for the hypocrite he truly was. She could easily hear their conversation with her super hearing. He didn't care for the code he never had. He only cared for himself and his own goals. Reaching behind her, she removed the machine gun from its strap, taking aim at the three men surrounding the girl. They barely had time to react when her gun went off, killing two in an instant. She rolled to the side, falling to the ground, immediately taking aim and killing the last one. Now you die, Elias said, raising his hands and snapping Gerard's neck. His lifeless body fell to the side, crashing into the rocky grass-covered ground. Elias ignored his falling body, disappearing in a blur of speed. Snap! The rope fell to the ground as Elias destroyed Bonnie's restraints. Hearing Kate's footsteps, he shielded Bonnie's body as he turned to look at her. You can relax, your uncle sent me, compulsion and all that. Kate turned to look at her father's gun still in hand. Will he wake up a vampire? No, he'll wake up still human. Elias turned back to Bonnie, reaching up to her face to remove the gag. Thanks, she then spat out the pieces of rope still in her mouth. He'll have 24 hours to drink human blood. Once he does, he'll become a vampire. Judging from your interference, you don't want that to happen, do you? No, but I'll take him off your hands. I think it's time for a little daddy-daughter talk. I think he owes me that much at least. Kate dropped her gun, walking over to Gerard. She smiled condescendingly before dragging him away by his ankle. You're just gonna let him take her? Bonnie asked. Yeah, I get the feeling he won't be living for another 24 hours, and we have other things to deal with. I'm sorry your vacation turned out like this. Are you joking? I asked for this, and besides getting kidnapped, I've enjoyed every moment of this. Elias wasn't sure if Bonnie was being truthful, but he decided to trust the smile on her face. It had been a difficult thing to learn as a child, but now he was better at it. He could tell if someone was lying, he could hear it all, but sometimes it was simply best not to listen. How's Lydia? Bonnie asked, looking up at her brother. She's missing, Derek too. I'm gonna need your help to find them. Bonnie nodded in response, and Elias looked down at his phone. It was currently 9 in the afternoon. Buzz. Elias wasn't surprised as a message from Styles appeared. Can't find Scott, any ideas? Looking away from his phone, Elias looked at the sky. The crescent moon illuminated the sky, giving him an idea. Yeah, I think I do. I'll drop you off at the house, put up a boundary spell if you have to. We can't have you getting kidnapped again. Elias and Bonnie entered the Mikaelson manor. Bonnie was quite surprised by the look of the place. Elias watched as she gripped her head, no doubt remembering the experience. Jackson was still unconscious. Elias wasn't sure when he'd wake up. By his still beating heart, he was sure he was alive. He didn't know what consequences killing Matt would have on Jackson. He hoped for Lydia's sake it wasn't fatal, but as of now, he seemed fine. "I'll be back later. Don't worry about the place for now, we'll clean it all up later." "Okay." "Bonnie," Elias called out, getting her attention. "Stay safe." "You too, little bro." Vamp speeding away, Elias stopped in the woods, looking up at the moon. His eyes shifted to a bloody shade of red. He began to remove his clothes as fast as he could. Once naked, he took in a deep breath before his canines elongated. A snarl escaped his mouth as his bones began to crack. The shift was fast, but just as painful as the first. Crack! He fell to the ground as he began to grow in size. Midnight dark hair began to cover his body, only this time it was sprinkled with bits of gray. Once in his Lycan form, Elias looked up at the moon, letting out a huff. From his mouth, he released an earth-shattering howl more akin to a roar. Across Beacon Hill's Elias' call could be heard by every supernatural being in the town. Styles, who was standing in front of Scott's car, froze as his eyes glowed gold. He felt his body being filled with power. In the car's door mirror, one could see specks of red appear within Styles' eyes. At Derek's loft, the three new betas fell to their knees upon hearing Elias roar. Complete suppression, making one of them understand why Derek listened to Elias' orders. The other two felt something else. Fear, maybe? What the hell was that? Erica asked, using the wall to balance her shaking legs. Right below Beacon Hills High, Lydia and Derek shot up from their unconscious states. Derek's eyes glowed red as he looked down at his restraints. I wouldn't do that if I were you." Jennifer's voice filtered through the vault, drawing their attention. "The wolfsbane on those chains may just enter your body if you move too much. Wouldn't want that now, would we?" "Jennifer? Peter's dead. Why are you doing this?" Derek asked, raising an eyebrow. "She works for Peter?" Lydia asked, confused. "Why'd you kidnap me?" "Because if Peter's to come back to life, I'll need the both of you." Jennifer smiled suspiciously as she said that. Argent basement. Scott opened his eyes, revealing his golden irises. He pulled at his chains, feeling stronger than ever. Seeing that they didn't budge, he focused on the primal urge that filled his being. Opening his mouth, he revealed a howl of his own. Revealing his location to the rest of his pack, he froze at that thought. His pack? When had he ever felt like a part of Elias' pack? He didn't have time to think about that question as he heard familiar footsteps. As the doors swung open, Victoria Argent revealed herself with a smile on her face. "It seems like you're ready to finally put an end to things. Allison will thank me one day for what I'm about to do to you." Elsewhere, both Elias and Styles, who was at Scott's car, took off in the direction of Scott's roar. Elias was much faster, appearing there almost immediately. He could hear Scott's screams as a woman laughed in delight. "And they said Kate was the crazy one," Elias commented as he walked into the room. "How did you get down here?" Victoria took a step back as she saw Elias. "You didn't hear the earth-shattering roar that left his mouth?" Seeing her face, he smiled. "You did. Well, so much for being a hunter. Wolves don't howl for very many reasons. He's tied up and being tortured. Think about it, why would he howl?" To reveal his location, Victoria turned to look back at Scott, disgust on her face. Ding ding ding. Elias clapped, finding this whole thing a tad bit fun. "Now for what reason could you be holding a 16-year-old boy captive? How inhumane." Elias revealed his pearly whites as he locked eyes with Victoria. "Inhumane." Contempt appeared on her face as the corners of her mouth fell flat. "He's a monster, just like you. I'm doing the world and my daughter a favor by getting rid of him." Victoria pointed at Scott as she yelled, "You think he's a monster?" Elias smiled, looking at Scott. "Out of everyone in my pack, he's the only one that wants absolutely nothing to do with this life. No matter how many times we've warned him, he wants a regular life. Maybe I should let you feel exactly how he feels." Vamp speeding towards, he grabbed her wrist. "Become the very thing you hate." Allowing his canines to elongate, he sunk them into her wrist. Taking a step back, he watched as Victoria dropped to the floor, gripping her wrist tightly. "No, what did you do?" He smiled as he heard that question. I've only given you the option to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Thank me when you wake up." Ignoring the confusion on her face, he looked into her eyes. Sleep. Compulsion worked like a charm, leaving Elias alone with Scott. "Let's get you out of here." Reaching for the chains, he easily snapped them, catching Scott before he could fall to the floor. "You'll be okay, Scott," Elias said as he carried him towards the door. "You care?" Scott asked, exhausted. "We may not be friends, Scott, but you're a part of my pack. That makes you family." Hours later, soon the sun would rise, and Bonnie had only recently completed the locator spell to find Derek and Lydia. They were the one place neither Elias nor Styles considered, the Hale family vault. Elias crept forward slowly. Just behind him stood a stoic-faced Styles. They had decided on a slow approach, considering how powerful the witch on the other side of the vault door was. Elias couldn't help but raise an eyebrow upon seeing the round metal vault door. It was wide open. Nothing but silence could be heard from within. Taking a closer listen, he identified 2 heartbeats. They were both slow and calm. "I'll go first. If it's a trap, you can call Bonnie." Elias knew no other way of taking care of Peter's witch. Maybe Bonnie could help. Stepping through the door, he covered his nostrils. A putrid smell filled the air. In the middle of the room, he could make out some kind of liquid. It wasn't quite red, more orange than anything. Tied up against the wall were both Lydia and Derek. Derek seemed drained. His skin was more pale than usual. It was as if something had been removed from him. Lydia, on the other hand, looked peaceful, as if she had fallen asleep in her own bed. He found it odd. Bonnie had mentioned her to be a witch, but he still found it weird. It was almost like nothing supernatural had an effect on her. Nothing except for magic. Maybe she was a witch. He took another look around the room before turning to the vault door. "It's clear. Come on in, Styles." He wondered what had taken place here, but the only people that could answer that question were currently unconscious. Elsewhere, Jennifer pulled her car over at a nearby gas station. She looked in the rearview mirror before climbing out of the car. It was red, nothing spectacular, just something to keep herself off the radar. Running into the gas station, he grabbed a prepaid phone before tossing it onto the counter. Looking at the row of candies in front of her, she grabbed a pack of Twizzlers before throwing them and 2 20s onto the counter. She didn't wait for her change. Once outside, she smiled as the passenger window began to roll down. Tossing the Twizzlers into the window, she leaned in, her face glowing when she heard his voice. "Twizzlers for me?" "Thanks, babe." Peter Hale's pale, disfigured face revealed itself under a dark hood. He grinned as he opened up the Twizzlers, taking a bite of one. "You get the phone set up. I'm sure they're dying to hear from me." He turned to look out the front window as he chewed his candy.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.